Hey friends, it's your girl Mia. This is Mia Horror Stories. And tonight's story, I drive a snowplow at night, and something keeps walking beside me barefoot, is told in darkness. The screen will stay black, so you can simply listen, imagine, and feel every moment without distraction. Trust me, the build-up matters, and the ending is where the real chill hides. So don't look away, and don't leave early. The first time I saw the footprints, they were keeping pace with me. Not behind the truck, not crossing the road ahead. Beside me, a line of bare human prints appeared in the fresh snow along the driver's side shoulder, each one pressed deep enough to show the heel, the arch, and 5 narrow toes. They ran parallel to the plow for nearly 30 yards, spaced like somebody was walking at a calm, ordinary pace while I crawled uphill in low gear. That alone wasn't impossible. What bothered me was that the shoulder had been untouched when my headlights swept over it 10 seconds earlier. I stopped the truck. The diesel engine settled into its rough idle, shaking the mirrors and making the coffee in my cup holder tremble against the plastic lid. Snow hissed against the windshield. The amber beacon turned above the cab, its light sliding across the ditch, the guardrail, and the dark wall of spruce trees beyond. The footprints ended level with my door. There was no person standing there. I leaned toward the glass and looked down as far as the mirror allowed. The nearest print was less than 3 feet from the truck, clean-edged, and already collecting a soft dusting of powder. Then the radio cracked. "Unit 12, you still moving?" I jerked hard enough to bump my knee against the steering column. The voice belonged to my supervisor, and I remember feeling embarrassed before I felt afraid. That tells you a lot about me. My name is Daniel Mercer, 38, male, and that winter I drove overnight routes for the County Highway Department in northern Vermont. I had been doing road maintenance for 9 years, though I'd only moved to the night shift the previous November. Nights paid a little more, and the schedule let me pick up my daughter from school twice a week without having to ask my ex-wife for favors. That was the practical reason. The private reason was that I had started sleeping badly after the divorce, and it was easier to tell people I worked nights than to explain why I was already awake at 3 in the morning anyway. I picked up the radio. "Yeah," I said, "I'm moving." "You stopped. Had to check the wing." The lie came out too easily. "Everything good." I looked at the prints again. The tracks hadn't changed. No new ones, no movement in the trees. Just 6 bare footprints ending beside the cab, as if whoever made them had climbed into the truck without opening the door. "Everything's fine." There was a pause filled with radio static and the hollow whine of my heater fan. "Keep an eye on temperature," my supervisor said. "It dropped 4 degrees since midnight. We're getting ice under the new snow." "Copy." I released the button. For another few seconds, I sat there with one gloved hand resting on the hydraulic controls. The plow blade was angled right, throwing snow toward the ditch. Its upper edge caught the headlights in a dirty stripe of orange paint and packed salt. The road ahead climbed toward Hazen Notch, where the state route narrowed, bent through forest, and lost cell service for almost 8 miles. I told myself someone had walked along the shoulder before the latest layer accumulated. Wind had filled the older prints, leaving the deeper ones exposed. The truck's vibration and the pressure wave from the blade had shaken loose snow out of them as I passed. It wasn't a good explanation, but it had parts. Wind, old tracks, loose snow. Explanations don't have to be elegant when you're alone at 2:17 in the morning. I eased off the brake. The plow rolled forward, chains clattering around the rear tires. In my side mirror, the footprints slid behind me and disappeared beneath the orange wash of the beacon. For the next mile, there were no more. By the time I reached the turnout near Millbrook, I had convinced myself I'd imagined the timing. That was where I met Elise. The county had assigned 2 trucks to the eastern loop because the forecast had been revised from 4 inches to nearly a foot. I handled the main route and steep grades. The smaller truck cleared intersections, pull-offs, and the access roads around the fire station and town garage. Elise Warren, 29, female, had joined the department 6 months earlier after working as a mechanic at her uncle's logging company. She was short, broad-shouldered, and capable of making almost any sentence sound like a challenge. She also carried a roll of electrical tape in every jacket she owned, including the clean one she wore to her mother's house on Sundays. Her truck was parked in the turnout with its blade raised. She stood beside it, kicking packed snow from the wheel well with the heel of her boot. I stopped alongside her and lowered my window. Cold air shoved into the cab, bringing the smell of diesel exhaust, wet wool, and road salt. "You break it already," I called. She looked up. "This truck was broken before my parents met." "Good answer. Your left headlight's flickering." "I know. You going to fix it?" "I'm waiting for it to develop character." He stepped closer and rested one forearm against my door. Snow had collected across the shoulders of her reflective coat. "You've got a face," she said. "I always have a face." "No, this is your weird face." "I don't have a weird face." "You do. Your mouth gets tight like you're trying not to complain in a restaurant." I looked past her toward the turnout. The snow there was churned by truck tires and marked with the deep tread of her insulated boots. No bare footprints. "You see anyone walking out here?" I asked. Elise followed my gaze. "Walking? Yeah, at 2 in the morning. That's why I'm asking." She straightened. "Where?" "Back near the west grade." "You almost hit somebody." "No." "Then what happened?" I regretted asking. Elise wasn't cruel, but she had the mechanic's habit of taking things apart once she knew something wasn't running right. "I saw tracks," I said. "Animal, person, boots, bare feet." She stared at me for half a second, then glanced toward the woods. "Somebody barefoot in this. Could have been old. Snow's been coming down since 10. "I know." She looked at my face again, more carefully this time. "Did you get out?" "No." "Good." The word was immediate. That surprised me. I tried to laugh. "You think the barefoot snowman-'s going to get me?" "I think people do stupid things when they're drunk, high, concussed, hypothermic, or trying to get you out of your vehicle." She said it without drama. Just a list of mechanical failures. Only this time the machine was human. Elise had volunteered with search and rescue for 3 winters. She had found lost skiers, stranded motorists, and once a man who had walked away from a rollover without shoes because one of his boots had been trapped under the brake pedal, and he hadn't realized he'd left the other one behind. "Did you call it in?" she asked. "No." "Why not?" "Because I saw footprints. I didn't see a person." You should still tell Roy. Roy was our supervisor, the voice on the radio. I told him I was checking the wing. That wasn't the question. I know. Elise knocked twice on my door with her knuckles. You're doing that thing again. What thing? Deciding something doesn't count because saying it out loud might make you look stupid. I turned the heater vent away from my face. That sounds made up. It's not. You did it when your brakes were grinding. They weren't grinding. Were grinding so loudly I heard them over the air compressor. That truck had personality. That truck almost had a funeral. She stepped back, then pointed up the road. I'm clearing the fire access. You've got the notch. Yeah, I'll catch you on the south side in 40, probably closer to an hour, because of the grade, because I take pride in my work, because you drive like an old man holding soup. She walked toward her truck. Elise, she stopped. What? If you see tracks, call me. Her teasing expression faded. I'll call Roy. Call me first. That's a strange request. I know. She studied me a moment longer, then nodded once. Fine. The window motor struggled as I raised the glass. Before it sealed, she called out, and Daniel, yeah, don't get out of the truck for footprints. I gave her a 2-finger salute and pulled away. For several minutes, the road felt ordinary again. That was one of the strange things about that night. Nothing stayed frightening for long. The work demanded too much attention. You had to watch the blade angle, the shoulder markers, the temperature gauge, and the shimmering patches where snow hid polished ice. Fear had to sit in the passenger seat and wait its turn. I climbed through the lower switchbacks at 15 miles an hour. Snow rolled from the blade in a continuous pale wave, striking the guardrail and bursting through its gaps. Every few seconds, a spruce branch dumped powder into the road with a soft, heavy collapse. The cab smelled of stale coffee and the peppermint gum I used to stay awake. A photo of my daughter, Mia, was tucked above the sun visor. She was 8, missing one front tooth, and wearing a purple bike helmet she hated. The picture had been taken the summer before the divorce became official. Whenever I drove the notch, I kept the visor down so I could see her. That was another thing I didn't tell people. My biggest fear wasn't dying on a mountain road. It was becoming somebody my daughter remembered mainly through schedules. Every other weekend. Wednesday pickups. A name on a calendar square. I had already missed her school winter concert because of an overtime call. She said it was okay. Kids say that when they know adults are already upset. The road curved left. My flickering headlight dimmed, recovered, then dimmed again. Beyond the guardrail, something pale moved between the trees. I tapped the brakes. The truck slowed. Nothing was there. A reflector on a roadside marker flashed white in the rotating beacon. That was all. A piece of plastic catching light at the wrong angle. I breathed out through my nose and kept driving. Unit 12, Roy said over the radio. Conditions. I picked up the handset. 6 inches at elevation. Packed base underneath. Some drift at the north bends. Visibility, 1/4 mile, maybe less in open sections. Copy. State police reported a disabled vehicle near the old quarry entrance. Silver Subaru, possibly off the shoulder. You see it. Check for occupants. Anyone confirmed inside. Caller lost contact. Could be abandoned. The quarry entrance was 3 miles ahead on the far side of the summit. I glanced at the temperature display. 9 degrees Fahrenheit. Bare skin would begin hurting almost immediately in that weather. A person without shoes could lose useful movement in their toes fast, especially if their feet were wet. I knew that from training, though the exact numbers escaped me. I also knew what Elise had said. Don't get out of the truck for footprints. Copy, I said. The road steepened. I lowered the plow slightly, and the hydraulic system groaned beneath the cab. At the summit, the wind struck broadside, shoving curtains of loose snow across the pavement. My high beams lit thousands of flakes, moving nearly horizontal. The reflective guideposts appeared one at a time and vanished behind me. Then my phone buzzed in its dashboard mount. No service showed on the screen, but a message had arrived before the signal dropped. It was from Elise. Found tracks near Fire Road. Bare. A second message appeared beneath it. They stop at my passenger door. I reached for the radio. Before I pressed the button, something slapped the side of my truck, not a branch. The sound was flat and soft, a palm against sheet metal. I looked in the driver's mirror. The road behind me was empty except for the wide, scraped lane and the churned snow spilling off the blade. Then the amber beacon rotated. For a fraction of a second, the shoulder lit up. There were footprints beside the truck again. Fresh ones. Left foot, right foot, left, keeping pace. I could see 4 before darkness swept over them. The truck was moving at 17 miles an hour. I stared forward and tightened both hands on the wheel. The quarry entrance lay ahead. Somewhere near it, a car might be buried in the snow with someone trapped inside. Behind me, Elise had found the same tracks. The radio worked. The truck worked. The road was still a road. Everything could still have a normal explanation. I lifted the handset. Elise, do you copy? Static. Then her voice, faint and broken. Daniel, I've got someone. The transmission cut out. I hit the button. Elise. Only static answered. Ahead, through the snow, 2 red lights appeared low on the right shoulder. The disabled Subaru. Its hazard lights were still blinking. Between me and the car, a human figure stood in the plowed lane. No coat, no shoes. The person raised one arm slowly, asking me to stop. I had enough distance to brake. I also had enough room to steer around them. My foot hovered over the pedal as the figure took one unsteady step toward the center of the road. And I had to decide whether to stop the truck. I stopped, not because it felt safe, because the person in the road folded at the knees. 1 second they were standing with one arm raised. The next they dropped sideways into the plowed lane with the loose, delayed motion of somebody whose body had finally stopped negotiating. I hit the brakes hard enough to send my coffee into the dashboard. The plow shuddered. Chains grabbed, slipped, grabbed again. The blade scraped sparks from something buried under the snow, and the truck slewed half a foot toward the center line before settling. The figure disappeared below the hood. For one ugly second, I thought I had run them over. I yanked the parking brake and leaned over the steering wheel, trying to see around the blade. Nothing, just the hazard lights of the Subaru blinking red through the snowfall. On, off, on, Elise, I said into the radio. Come back. Static cracked against my ear. Elise, "I've got a person down at the quarry entrance. I need your location." No answer. I switched channels and called Roy. "Base, Unit 12. Roy answered at once. "Go ahead." I found the Subaru. One person in the road, collapsed, barefoot, no coat. There was a pause, short but noticeable. "Are you sure?" "Yes. Vehicle occupied. Can't tell yet. State police are tied up on a rollover near Lowell. Ambulance is coming from Hardwick, but they're at least 25 minutes out." 25 minutes in 9-degree weather was not an abstract number. It was tissue damage, confusion, a heart that could start doing the wrong thing. "Any update on Elise?" I asked. "She hasn't checked in. She messaged me, said she found tracks near the fire road." "What tracks?" "Bare feet." Roy exhaled into the microphone. "Daniel, stay in the cab. There's a person down in front of me. I heard you. They're exposed." I heard you. The way he said it made me angry. Not because he was wrong, because he was being careful while I was the one looking at the place where the person had fallen. "Call the ambulance again," I said. "They're already moving. I need to get them into the truck. You don't know what's going on. I know they'll freeze out there." "Daniel," the supervisor voice had arrived, flat, controlled, designed to stop a bad decision before it became paperwork. "You do not exit until you can confirm the scene is safe." The hazard lights blinked. I watched the empty space below the hood. What does safe look like from inside the cab? It looks like waiting for law enforcement. They're 25 minutes away. Ambulance is 25. Trooper may be longer. I looked toward the Subaru. It sat nose first in the ditch, angled down, rear tires still on the shoulder. Snow had packed against the passenger side. The driver's door hung open 3 or 4 inches, held by the drift. The interior light was on. No movement inside. Then something struck my passenger door. 3 quick taps. I turned so fast the seat belt locked across my chest. The window was empty. No face. No hand. Only snow flowing sideways in the amber light. "Daniel," Roy said. I raised the radio slowly. "Something just hit the truck. A branch. No trees close enough. Stay inside." I looked down at the door locks. Both were engaged. Then I heard a scraping sound below the passenger window. Slow, uneven, like fingernails dragging along salted metal. It continued toward the rear of the cab and stopped. Roy repeated my name. "I'm here. You sound winded. I'm fine." "You are not fine. Stay put." Should have listened. That is easy to say now. It sounds reasonable, even obvious, from a warm room where the walls don't move and nobody is lying in the road. But the figure's bare feet were still in my head. Purple toes, wet skin against snow. My daughter once got locked out of the house for 12 minutes after school because I had forgotten to leave the key where I promised. It was 28 degrees that day. She cried when I arrived, not because she was hurt, but because she thought I had forgotten her. I had, for 12 minutes, I had become exactly the kind of father I was terrified of being. I unlatched the seat belt. "Daniel," Roy said, hearing the click, "do not get out." "I'm checking from the step." "That's getting out. I can see under the blade from there. Wait for backup." I opened the driver's door. Wind shoved snow into the cab and stole the warmth in a single breath. The engine sounded louder outside, a dense mechanical pounding I could feel through the step. I kept one hand on the interior grab bar and leaned out. The person was lying 6 feet ahead of the blade, A woman. She was on her side with her knees drawn toward her chest. Her hair was dark and stuck across her face. She wore gray sweatpants and a thin, long-sleeved shirt. No socks, no shoes. Her feet were red along the soles and pale at the toes. "Ma'am," I shouted. She didn't move. I climbed down. The cold bit through my work pants immediately. Snow slid over the tops of my boots as I went around the blade. The truck's exhaust pushed around me in oily waves. I carried a flashlight in one hand and the radio in the other. "Daniel, return to the cab," Roy said. "Female, maybe 30s, unconscious or unresponsive. Do not touch her." I crouched several feet away. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered. That small movement erased the last of my caution. I moved closer. There was blood on the side of her head, not much, but enough to darken her hair near the temple. Her cheek rested directly against the snow. "Hey," I said, "I'm Daniel. I drive for the county. Can you look at me?" Her eyes opened. They did not focus on my face. She stared past me at the truck. "No," she whispered. "You're hurt. I need to get you somewhere warm." Her hand shot out and gripped my sleeve. The strength of it surprised me. "No truck. What? Don't put me in there." Her words came through chattering teeth. "You'll freeze out here." She shook her head and looked toward the trees. "You'll see." "Who?" Her grip tightened. "The man walking." A gust threw snow across her face. She closed her eyes and made a sound low in her throat. I looked toward the shoulder. There were tracks around her now, but the wind had already blurred them. Bare footprints led from the Subaru to the place where she lay. That explained one set. Maybe all of them. Disoriented woman could have walked along the road before I arrived. In blowing snow, distance and timing could play tricks. Tracks could appear and disappear under shifting powder. I grabbed onto that explanation because it was available. "What's your name?" I asked. She hesitated. "Lena, last name, Voss." "How many people were in the Subaru?" Her face changed. Not dramatically. Her mouth simply stopped trembling for one beat. "2. Where's the other person?" She turned her head toward the woods. "After him." "Who went after who?" Lena tried to sit up and failed. Her elbow slipped and her head nearly hit the road. I caught her under the shoulder. She screamed. I released her immediately. "Sorry. Where are you hurt?" "My ribs." "Did the car crash?" He made us stop. "Who?" "The barefoot man." The phrase sounded ridiculous in her mouth, but nothing about her expression suggested she was trying to frighten me. "Was he in the road?" She nodded. "Like you were." Her eyes found mine then. "I wasn't in the road." I stared at her. "You were standing in front of my truck." "No." "You waved at me." "No, I didn't." The radio crackled. Elise's voice came through, broken by static. "Daniel, where?" I grabbed it. "Elise, I'm at the quarry entrance. I found a woman." "Where are you?" "Fire Road. Truck stuck." "Are you hurt?" "No, I found." The signal tore apart. "Elise." "Boy in the ditch." "A boy." Lena moved beside me. "What did she say?" I held up one finger. "Elise, repeat." "Teenager," she said, clearer now. "Male, no shoes, possible head injury. He keeps trying to run." Lena made a sharp sound. "Evan." I looked at her. "You know him." "My brother." "How old?" 17. I keyed the radio. "Elise, his name may be Evan Voss." 17. There was a pause. "That matches." He gave me Evan. "Can you get him into your truck? He won't come near it." Lena started shaking harder. "He thinks the man is inside." I turned away from the radio. What man? The one who stopped us. Tell me exactly what happened. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to put events in order. We were driving from Maurysville. Evan was supposed to stay with me because our mom's in Boston and he got suspended again. We took the notch because the highway app said the main route had a crash. That road closure wasn't posted until after midnight, I said. I know. What time did you leave? 11:30. That didn't fit. Even in snow, Maurysville to the quarry entrance should not have taken more than an hour and a half. They had lost at least an hour somewhere. We saw someone walking on the shoulder, Lena continued. Barefoot, no coat. Evan said we had to stop. I told him no. We passed him, her breath hitched. Then he was ahead of us again. I said nothing. We passed him twice. I thought there were two people. Evan said it was the same man because of the shirt. What shirt? White thermal, dirty down the back. The woman's account could have been concussion, shock, or confusion. Two pedestrians dressed alike, a loop in the road, a person taking a shortcut through the trees. Still explainable, all of it. The third time, she said, he stood in the lane. Evan grabbed the wheel. We went into the ditch. And then, the man came to my window. What did he do? Nothing. Did he threaten you? No. Did he speak? She swallowed. He asked if we had seen his shoes. The engine idled behind us. Metal ticked under the strain of cold. Somewhere beneath the truck, compressed air released with a sudden hiss. Lena flinched so hard, she nearly rolled onto her back. I checked her pupils with the flashlight. The right looked slightly larger than the left, though I couldn't be certain in the moving light. We need to get you warm, I said. You may have a head injury. No truck. You can sit by the open door. You don't have to go all the way in. He checks vehicles. Who does? She stared at me as though I was deliberately being slow. The man. I keyed the radio. Roy, patient, is conscious. Possible head injury, rib injury, hypothermia. Her brother is with Elise near the fire road. Roy answered. Ambulance updated. They want both patients kept still and insulated. Copy. Where are you? Beside the blade. Get her into the cab and get yourself inside. I put the radio away and removed my outer coat. Lena tried to stop me. You need it. I've got layers. That was mostly true. I wrapped the coat around her shoulders and helped her sit. This time I supported her from behind, avoiding the ribs. Her teeth clicked together so loudly I could hear them over the engine. A movement near the Subaru caught my attention. The driver's door opened another inch, then stopped. I aimed the flashlight. Is anyone else in the car? No. Are you sure? Yes. The door moved again. Not much, just enough to push snow from its lower edge. Wind could do that. Except the wind was blowing toward the car, not away from it. Daniel, Elise said over the radio. I need help. Her voice had changed. What happened? Evan ran, toward your direction, I think. He bolted when I tried to wrap his feet. How long ago? 30 seconds. Can you see him? No, I stood. Elise, stay with your truck. I can't, he's injured. You said your truck is stuck. Front wheel slid into the drainage cut. I can probably winch out, but not fast. Lena grabbed my pant leg. Don't let him come here. He's your brother. He'll bring him. Bring who? But she had begun crying without making much sound, tears gathering along her lower lashes and freezing in the wind. I looked uphill. The road curved out of sight between the trees. Fresh snow had already softened the lane I'd cleared. visibility was less than 100 yards. A teenager with a head injury and bare feet was somewhere between Elise and us. The ambulance was still at least 20 minutes away. I had Lena on the ground beside my plow, a disabled Subaru in the ditch, Elise stuck near the fire road, and Roy telling everyone to wait for help that could not arrive quickly enough. This was no longer about strange footprints. It was a search and rescue problem, a bad one. I guided Lena toward the truck. She resisted until her knees buckled, then let me half carry her to the driver's side step. As I reached for the handle, I noticed the door was closed. I had left it open. I was certain of that. The engine was still running. The cab light glowed behind the frosted glass. My keys were in the ignition. I pulled the handle, locked. I tried again. Both doors had been locked from inside. For a moment, I just stood there, holding Lena upright while the amber beacon turned over us. "Roy," I said into the radio, "I'm locked out. How? I don't know. Spare key. In the cab." Roy swore. Elise broke in. "There's a magnetic spare under the rear toolbox on Unit 12. I had forgotten about it. Fleet started hiding spares after a driver locked himself out during a storm 3 years earlier. I helped Lena sit against the front tire, shielded from some of the wind by the blade. "Stay here," she caught my wrist. "Don't go behind the truck. The key is behind the truck. There was someone there before you stopped." I looked at her. "What did you see?" She pointed with one shaking hand toward the rear axle. "Feet." The amber light passed over the snow behind the truck. For an instant, I saw nothing. Then the beacon came around again. A set of bare footprints led out from beneath the rear of the plow. They crossed the scraped road and continued into the trees. There were no tracks leading under the truck, only tracks coming out. Before I could make sense of that, a figure stumbled into the road uphill. Thin, barefoot, arms held out for balance. Evan took 2 steps toward us, then looked behind him. His face twisted. "Get in," he screamed. He ran downhill. Something moved in the trees at the inside of the curve, keeping pace with him. Not walking now, running. And the only way to reach the spare key was to go behind the locked truck. Evan reached the truck before I reached the spare key. He came downhill in a broken sprint, one arm clamped across his ribs, bare feet slapping the scraped pavement with a wet sound that carried even through the engine noise. Snow clung to his shins. His gray hoodie was torn at one shoulder, and blood had dried in a narrow line from his left ear to his jaw. "Behind you," he shouted. I turned toward the trees. A dark shape moved between 2 spruce trunks, low and fast. I grabbed the steel edge of the plow frame and pulled Lena closer to the front tire. The shape burst through the brush. For half a second, it looked human. Bent forward, pale at the head, coming straight at us. Then it hit the roadside ditch and stopped. A white-tailed deer stood chest deep in drifted snow, its breath pumping white around its muzzle. One antler was missing. A strip of plastic survey ribbon hung from the other, snapping in the wind. The deer twisted, kicked free, and bounded across the road behind Evan. Its hooves struck the plowed surface 4 times, hard, hollow, almost like bare feet. Then it disappeared down the slope toward the quarry. Evan folded against the side of the truck. "That wasn't him," he said. "No," I said. "It was." His face showed no relief. Lena reached for him from where she sat against the tire. Evan. He looked at her as if he had forgotten she existed. Then he dropped beside her. She put both hands on his face, turning it gently from side to side. Where were you? He followed us. Who? Evan stared at me. The guy from the road. I crouched in front of them. Did he touch either of you? No. Did he threaten you? No. Did he have a weapon? I don't know. That means no. That means I didn't see one. His breathing was too fast. His lips had gone pale, and the skin around his eyes looked gray. We need to get inside the truck, I said. Evan shook his head. He knows the trucks. What does that mean? He was inside hers. Elise S. He nodded. Lena's hand tightened around his wrist. When she found me, I saw him sitting in the passenger seat. I looked uphill. The road curved left about 80 yards away, then climbed out of view toward the fire access. Elise was somewhere beyond that bend, less than half a mile away. Did Elise see him? She was outside. What happened when she came back? He was gone. That could have been a jacket on the seat, a shadow, her safety vest. It looked at me. I had no answer for that, so I stood. The magnetic spare was still under the rear toolbox. To reach it, I had to walk along the passenger side, past the rear axle, then crouch under the salt spreader. Stay against the blade, I told them. The wind's lighter there. Evan grabbed my sleeve. Don't go back there. I have to get the key. Use the other truck. Elise S. is stuck. The Subaru. Lena looked toward the ditch. The keys are in it. I followed her gaze. The Subaru sat 30 yards ahead and right, nose down in the shallow quarry access ditch. Its rear bumper remained close to the shoulder. The driver's door was still cracked against packed snow. That gave us another option. Bad, but closer. We'll use the Subaru for shelter, I said. Then I'll get the truck open. Lena shook her head. It won't start, dead battery. It was running after we went off. Then why won't it start? She hesitated. The key's gone. You just said it was inside. I thought it was. Evan looked away. That was the first moment I understood they were hiding something from each other as much as from me. Who took it? I asked. Neither answered. Evan. He rubbed both hands over his forearms. The man did. Lena snapped toward him. You said you dropped it. I lied. Why? Because you were already freaking out. I was freaking out because we crashed. No, you were freaking out before. Their voices rose together, sharp and tired. I stepped between them. Enough. We solve one problem at a time. The sentence sounded like something Roy would say. I hated that it steadied me. First problem, get heat. Second, get Elise mobile. Third, keep the injured siblings alive until medical help arrived. Whatever had happened before I found them could wait. I moved toward the rear of the plow. The truck was 11 feet high at the salt box, broad enough to block most of the road. The driver's side sat near the center line. The passenger side was close to the ditch, where loose snow had piled knee-deep from the blade. I kept one hand on the truck's metal side and pushed through the drift. Each step sank to mid-calf. The amber beacon rotated above me, turning the world orange, then black, then orange again. At the rear wheel, I stopped. A bare footprint was pressed into the snow beside the tire. Fresh. The edges were crisp. Meltwater shone in the heel. There was another print near the mud flap, then a third beneath the spreader assembly. The tracks did not come from the road or the woods. They started there. I lowered myself onto one knee and aimed the flashlight under the truck. Salt crystals glittered against the steel frame, hydraulic lines, packed snow, the chain conveyor above the spreader. No person. The magnetic key box was fixed beneath the tool compartment, just forward of the rear bumper. I reached toward it. Something dropped onto my shoulder. I lurched sideways and struck my head against the metal box. A white hand lay across my coat. I shouted and ripped it away. It was a work glove, frozen stiff. The fingers had been coated in pale road salt, making it look like skin in the flashlight beam. It must have been caught on the frame and shaken loose when I leaned under the truck. I stood there breathing through my mouth, holding the glove by its cuff. "Daniel," Lena called. "I'm fine." My voice cracked on the second word. I threw the glove into the ditch and reached under the toolbox again. The key case was empty. Only the small black magnet remained. I checked the ground. I swept my flashlight across the snow under the axle around the tire. Nothing. "Elise," I said into the radio. "The spare is gone." Her answer came through quickly. "What do you mean gone?" "The box is here. Key is." Fleet might have forgotten to replace it. "Who used it last?" "Roy locked himself out last month." "Roy cut in." I put it back. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Yes, I'm sure." The wind surged, burying his next words under static. I moved toward the rear bumper, scanning the ground. A flash of metal caught the light near the spreader chute. I bent down. Not a key. A brass zipper pull. Small, oval, torn away from a jacket. I picked it up. Stamped into the metal were the letters VT Doc, Vermont Department of Corrections. I held it under the light. "Lena," I called. "Did the man have a jacket?" She didn't answer. I walked back to the blade. Evan was standing now, though Lena had one hand locked around his sleeve. I showed them the zipper pull. Both recognized it. Evan's face closed first. "Where did you find that?" "Behind the truck." Lena looked at her brother. "You said it was a white shirt." "It was." "Then what is that?" "I don't know." "You do know." He pulled his arm from her grip. "Stop, Evan." I said stop. I moved closer. "Who is he?" Evan looked toward the woods. The highway curved around the quarry on a narrow shelf. To our right, the slope dropped through trees, an exposed rock toward the old excavation pit. To the left, the hillside climbed steeply toward the fire road where Elise was stuck. There were only two ways out by vehicle: uphill past Elise, or downhill the direction I had come. On foot, the woods offered 100 routes, most of them dangerous in a storm. Evan wiped his nose with his sleeve. "His name, S. Paul." Lena stared at him. "How do you know that?" He told me. "When, before we left, the storm seemed to thin around us for a second. Not quieter, just more precise." "When did you meet him?" I asked. Evan's jaw worked. "At the gas station in Maury'sville." Lena stood too quickly and swayed. I caught her elbow. "You said you never saw him before the road." "I didn't," she said. "I swear. He talked to me when you went inside," Evan said. "Asked where we were headed." "And you told him?" I said. "Boston." "We were not going to Boston." "I know. What else did you say?" He asked if we were taking the main highway. Lena's expression changed from anger to something sharper. "You told him about the notch." Evan said nothing. "You told a stranger our route. He seemed normal. He was barefoot." "No, he had boots then." That detail landed harder than anything else. I looked at the tracks beside the plow. Describe him. 40s maybe, thin, shaved head, gray prison jacket over the white thermal, prison jacket, like a work coat, green-gray. The zipper pull in my glove felt suddenly heavy. Roy's voice came over the radio. Daniel, listen carefully. Dispatch just called back. State police are looking for an escapee. Nobody spoke. Roy continued. Male, 43, walked away from a minimum security work detail near Newport yesterday afternoon. Name is Paul Dutcharm. Evan closed his eyes. Jesus, Lena whispered. Reported clothing, I asked. Gray-green corrections jacket, white thermal shirt, work pants, issued boots. What's he in for? Burglary, assault, vehicle theft. The information organized the night without making it safer. A man used to taking cars. A man who knew people hesitated for stranded pedestrians, and who could have removed his boots to create a memorable distraction or to treat injured feet, then use the confusion to approach vehicles. Still, parts did not fit. How did he get from Newport to Maurysville? I asked. Could have stolen a ride. And why take his shoes off? No idea. Lena pressed her hands to her mouth. He followed us because Evan told him where we were going. I didn't know. You gave him our route. I didn't know. Their argument broke apart when the radio squealed. Elise's voice came through. I've got movement near my truck. I keyed the handset. Stay inside. I'm outside. Why? Winch cable. I was trying to rig it to a spruce. Get back in. The door closed behind me. I stopped breathing for a moment. Locked. Yes. Keys inside. Yes. Roy swore again, louder this time. Elise, I said, do you see anyone? No, but there are tracks around the cab. Bear, a pause, boots. That made more sense and frightened me more. Paul still had boots somewhere. Can you reach the fire station access on foot? Roy asked. Not safely. The road edge is buried, and I've got the drainage cut between me and the downhill side. How far from Daniel? Maybe 600 yards by road. I pictured the map. My truck sat at the quarry entrance below the left-hand bend. Elise was uphill beyond the bend, near the fire road spur that climbed west toward an unmanned seasonal station. Between us lay a narrow stretch with a rock wall on one side and a steep drop on the other. Paul could be in those woods. He could also be inside one of the trucks. Daniel, Elise said, quieter now. I found something on the running board. What? A key. What kind? County Fleet tag. I looked back at the empty magnetic box. He took my spare, I said. He's been at both trucks, Elise replied. Evan began backing away from us. No, Lena turned. Evan, he wants the plow. We know. You don't, he pointed uphill. He said he needed a truck big enough to clear the gate. What gate? I asked. The quarry. Behind the disabled Subaru, half hidden by drifted snow, was a steel access gate across the old quarry road. The county had closed the site years ago after a rockslide made the lower pit unstable. Beyond the gate, the road descended in switchbacks to a maintenance building and an abandoned scale house. Why would he want to go down there? Lena asked. Evan shook his head. I don't know. He kept asking if the lower road was plowed. A deep metallic clunk sounded from inside my truck. We all turned. The engine changed pitch. The hydraulic pump whined. The plow blade began to lift, slowly at first, then faster. Snow cascaded from its upper edge as the blade rose away from the road, exposing Lena and Evan to the full wind. Someone was operating the controls inside the locked cab. I ran toward the driver's door and pulled the handle. Still locked. The windshield reflected the beacon and snow. I could not see past the glare. "Get away from it," Roy shouted over the radio. The truck lurched. The parking brake released with a loud pneumatic snap. The plow rolled forward. Lena dragged Evan toward the ditch while I jumped onto the driver's step and hammered the window with my flashlight. A face appeared behind the glass. Thin, shaved head, white thermal shirt. Paul looked at me without expression. Then he put the transmission into gear. Plow accelerated toward the disabled Subaru and the quarry gate beyond it. I dropped from the step before the rear tire caught me. The truck's raised blade struck the Subaru's rear quarter panel, spun the car sideways, and shoved it down into the ditch. Metal folded with a deep grinding roar. The path to the gate opened. Paul drove straight through it. The chain snapped. One steel gatepost bent flat beneath the plow. The truck disappeared down the quarry access road, its amber beacon flashing between the trees. For several seconds, all we could hear was the engine descending toward the lower pit. Then came a distant crash. The radio in my hand lit up. Elise was shouting my name. Behind us, the Subaru shifted in the ditch. Its rear end slid lower. The passenger side dropped, and Lena screamed. The movement revealed what the car had been resting on. A section of the road shoulder had collapsed beneath the snow. Dark space opened under the vehicle, 5 or 6 feet across, with water moving somewhere below. The drainage culvert had washed out. A crack ran from the ditch toward the center of the highway. Then another. The pavement beneath my boots sank half an inch. "Move," I shouted. We scrambled uphill. The road gave way behind us. Asphalt, snow, and the Subaru dropped into the washout with a crushing series of impacts. The rear hazard light blinked once from below, then vanished under dirty water and debris. The collapse cut across both lanes. The downhill route was gone. My truck was somewhere inside the closed quarry. Elise remained locked out uphill, and the only direction left was toward her, along the narrow curve where Paul had already walked unseen. We started uphill because there was nowhere else to go. The road behind us had broken open. The quarry was below. Elise was above the bend, locked outside her truck, and the temperature had dropped far enough that Lena's wet hair had begun freezing into separate dark strands against her cheek. Evan could barely walk. His feet left red smears in the snow. I put his right arm across my shoulders and told Lena to hold my belt with one hand so she wouldn't drift toward the washed-out shoulder. We moved along the center line because it was the only part of the road I still trusted. The highway climbed gently for the first 100 yards, then tightened against the hillside. On the left, exposed rock rose nearly vertical, black, and wet beneath shelves of snow. The right, the shoulder dropped into spruce and darkness toward the quarry pit. The wind came through the bend in hard bursts. Every gust erased a little more of our trail. "Elise," I said into the radio, "talk to me." Her answer came thin and shaky. "I'm by the rear wheel. Can you see the curve?" "No, snow's too heavy." "Any sign of Paul?" "No, keep the radio under your coat." "I know how batteries work, Daniel. The irritation helped. It sounded like her. We reached the first roadside marker. I could hear Evan's teeth clicking together. "Shoes," he muttered. "What?" He kept asking about his shoes. Lena tightened her grip on my belt. "Save your breath." "No, I know why." I stopped. Evan sagged against me. "Why?" "He took them off because of the chains." "What chains?" "At the gas station. His boots had metal loops around the ankles. Corrections, transport restraints. Not normal footwear. Issued work boots with ankle hardware would have made him easier to identify and harder to move quietly. He could have abandoned them after leaving the gas station or after stealing another vehicle. Then the footprints were his, Lena said. "Some of them," I replied. "Not all." The tracks beside my moving plow still bothered me. So did the ones that seemed to begin beneath the truck. But the storm had been shifting snow across the road in sheets. Tracks could vanish between passes of the beacon. A person moving through the ditch could appear to stay alongside us while taking shortcuts through bends. Bare feet made Paul's trail distinctive, but not impossible. The road curved left. Elise's truck came into view. It sat diagonally across the uphill lane, nose angled toward the rock wall. Its front right wheel had sunk into a drainage cut hidden beneath the snow. The winch cable ran from the front bumper toward a spruce on the hillside, but hung slack, half buried. Elise stood at the rear of the truck. Elise Warren, 29, female, looked smaller than I had ever seen her. Her reflective coat was white with snow. One glove was missing. She held the fleet's spare key in her bare hand so tightly that the metal had cut into her palm. When she saw us, she ran downhill. Then she saw Evan's feet and slowed. "Oh, hell. We need the cab open," I said. I tried the key. And wrong unit. Of course it was. Daniel's unit 12. Elise's unit 7. Paul had carried my spare uphill, either deliberately or because he had pocketed it before entering my truck. He had left it where Elise would find it, knowing it would not unlock hers. A joke or bait. "Can you break a window?" Lena asked. "Laminated front glass," Elise said. "Side glass will go, but then we lose heat." "We have no heat now." Elise looked at Evan, then at Lena's head wound. "Fair." She picked up a steel winch hook from the snow and moved toward the passenger window. I caught her arm. Wait, the interior light was off. The doors were locked, but the passenger seat looked wrong. A dark mound sat upright against the backrest. Evan saw it too. "That's him." Elise stepped back. "I told you I saw movement." I aimed my flashlight through the glass. The beam reflected off salt, frost, and the plastic partition behind the seats. The mound did not move. "Paul," I shouted. Nothing. I struck the door with my palm. No response. Elise raised the hook. "Stand clear." She hit the lower corner of the passenger window. The first blow bounced. The second starred the glass. On the third, the window collapsed inward with a sharp rush, scattering cubes across the seat and floor. The dark figure fell sideways. Lena screamed. Elise swung the hook again before I grabbed it. Stop. It was a coat. A gray-green corrections jacket stuffed with a roll of emergency blankets and wedged against the seat. Paul's jacket. Inside one sleeve was a county radio. The radio was turned on. I could hear Roy calling our unit through its speaker. Paul had taken the portable from my cab, wrapped it in the coat, and left it inside Elise's truck. That explained the movement Evan had seen in the passenger seat earlier. The jacket had been there before Elise became locked out. In rotating amber light, with snow moving across the window, it could look like a man turning his head. Elise reached through the broken window and opened the door. Warm air was gone, but the cab still gave us shelter. We lifted Evan inside. He cried out when his feet touched the rubber floor mat. Lena climbed in after him, moving one careful inch at a time. Elise pulled the emergency blankets from Paul's coat and wrapped them around both siblings. I inspected the dash. Keys still in the ignition. The doors had not locked themselves. Paul had reached into the cab while Elise was rigging the winch, pressed the lock switch, and shut the door. He had done the same to my truck earlier, likely while I was crouched beside Lena beyond the blade. He had stayed low, used the trucks as cover, moved in the blind spots created by the salt boxes and rotating lights. Not a ghost, just patient. "Can you drive it out?" I asked. Elise climbed behind the wheel and started the engine. The diesel turned twice, coughed, then caught. "Wheel S buried deep," she said. "Winch lines rigged, but I never tensioned it." "Do it now." She engaged the winch. The cable tightened. The spruce bent slightly under the load. Elise shifted into reverse and feathered the throttle. The truck rocked but did not rise again. The front wheel spun, throwing gray slush against the rock wall. "Stop," I said, "you'll dig deeper. We stay here, they freeze. We need traction under the tire. There's sand in the hopper, and shovels. Side compartment." I climbed down. My legs shook when they took my weight. Exhaustion had arrived quietly, first as stiffness in my hands, then as a pressure behind my eyes. Now every movement felt delayed, as though I had to send instructions through deep water. Elise opened the side compartment from inside, using the hydraulic latch. I pulled out a square shovel and 2 bags of coarse traction sand. We worked at the buried wheel. Snow had packed beneath the axle and around the differential. The drainage cut was deeper than Elise thought, nearly 3 feet at the center. Meltwater ran beneath the crust, eating away at the road edge. Dug until my shoulders burned. Elise fed sand beneath the tire. From the cab, Lena shouted, "Someone's coming." I stood. Downhill, beyond the bend, amber light flashed between the trees. My plow. Paul was driving back up from the quarry. The engine roared in low gear. "He's coming for the truck," Elise said, "or the road." The stolen plow appeared around the curve. Its blade was raised halfway. The left headlight flickered. My flickering headlight. The truck moved slowly because one front tire was damaged. It lurched with every rotation, leaving a dark streak on the scraped road. Paul sat behind the wheel. Blood covered one side of his face. The crash below had injured him, but not stopped him. He saw us. The plow accelerated. "Elise, get in." She climbed into the cab. I threw the shovel aside and ran for the passenger door. No room. Lena and Evan filled the bench area, wrapped together beneath silver blankets. "Rear step," Elise shouted. I grabbed the exterior rail and climbed onto the service platform behind the cab. The truck rocked as Elise engaged reverse. The winch pulled. The buried wheel spun. didn't move. Paul's plow was 60 yards away. 50. The blade began to lower. Hydraulics screamed. "He's going to hit us," Lena shouted. Elise pressed harder on the accelerator. The winch cable tightened to a straight, vibrating line. The spruce groaned. Our truck shifted 2 inches, then slipped back. Paul was using my plow like a battering ram. He did not need speed. The machine weighed more than 10 tons loaded with salt. At 20 miles an hour, it would crush the side of Elise's truck against the rock wall. I looked at the winch cable, then at the approaching blade. "Elise, release the clutch on the winch." "What? Free spool it. We need the cable." "Do it." She hit the control. The cable slackened. I jumped down and dragged the loose line across the road. Hook was still anchored around the spruce on the uphill side. The cable ran from Elise's front bumper to the tree. By pulling the middle section downhill, I could stretch it across Paul's lane at axle height. Not strong enough to stop a plow. Maybe enough to change where it went. Paul was 30 yards away. I wrapped the cable around the steel guardrail post on the downhill shoulder and clipped the hook back onto the line, making a crude triangle between Elise's bumper, the spruce, and the post. "Daniel." Elise screamed. I ran uphill. Paul struck the cable. It caught beneath the lowered plow blade. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the cable snapped tight. The guardrail post tore halfway from the ground. The spruce bent violently. Elise's truck jerked forward. Paul's plow pulled left. Its damaged tire climbed the edge of the snowbank and lost contact. The blade struck the rock wall. The impact folded the left wing backward. The truck spun across the road. The rear salt box swung toward me. I jumped into the ditch. Metal struck metal above my head. Paul's plow slammed broadside into Elise's front bumper. The winch cable broke. A strand whipped across the road with a rifle shot crack. Something hit my lower leg. I felt pressure before pain, then heat. I rolled onto my back. My left pant leg was torn open below the knee. Blood spread through the fabric. The cable had sliced across my calf, not through to bone, but deep enough that the skin had opened in a long red mouth. I pressed both hands against it. "Elise, I'm here." The collision had knocked her truck backward. The buried wheel rose out of the drainage cut and landed on packed snow. She was free. Paul's plow idled sideways across the road, nose buried against the rock wall. Steam or coolant vapor poured from beneath the hood. The driver's door opened. Paul fell out. He hit the road on his hands and knees. Bare feet. That was when I saw what the cold had done to them. Soles were torn and blackened in places, with strips of skin hanging loose. He had wrapped wire and cloth around one ankle. Every step had been agony, but pain had not made him stop. He looked toward Elise's truck, toward Evan. "You," he said. Evan recoiled into the cab. Paul reached under his shirt and pulled out a short pry bar, not a gun. In that moment, that almost made it worse. A pry bar meant he planned to get close. Elise stepped down from the cab, holding the winch hook. "Stay back." Paul laughed once. His lips were split. "You think this is your road?" Elise held the hook with both hands. "It is tonight." He came at her, not fast. He could not run anymore, but he kept coming. I tried to stand. My leg folded beneath me. Lena climbed from the passenger side, still wrapped in the emergency blanket. "Stay inside," I shouted. She ignored me. Paul swung the pry bar. Elise blocked with the winch hook. Metal rang. The force knocked her sideways against the truck. Paul raised the bar again. Lena grabbed the square shovel from the snow and drove it into the back of his injured knee. His leg collapsed. He turned and struck her across the shoulder with the pry bar. The blow dropped her instantly. Evan screamed. Elise hit Paul in the side of the head with the hook. He fell against the truck, but did not go down. He grabbed her coat and dragged her toward him. I pulled myself across the road using my elbows. My flashlight lay near the ditch. The plow controls. I could see through the open door of my truck. The engine still ran. The blade was jammed against the wall, folded crooked, but the right wing remained extended across part of the road. I forced myself upright against the step. Paul had Elise by the throat now. Lena was moving slowly, one arm hanging wrong. Evan climbed from the cab despite his feet. "Leave her alone." Paul looked at him. That was the opening. I climbed into my plow. Every movement sent pain through my leg. I dragged myself onto the seat and reached for the hydraulic controls. The right wing lever still responded. I pulled it inward. The wing folded toward the truck. Its steel edge swept across the narrow space beside the cab. Elise saw it and dropped. Paul did not. The wing struck him at hip level. It pinned him against the side of Elise's truck with a heavy, final thud. He dropped the pry bar. The hydraulic system groaned. I released the control. Paul sagged but remained trapped between the folded wing and the other vehicle. His chest moved in short, shallow pulls. Elise crawled away from him. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Only engines, wind, the ticking of damaged metal. Roy's voice came through the radio inside Paul's abandoned jacket. "Unit 12, Unit 7, respond." Elise reached through the broken window and picked it up. "This is Elise." Her voice shook. "Paul is contained. Multiple injuries. Road is gone below us. Send rescue from the north." Roy asked if we were safe. Elise looked at Paul, at Lena on the ground, at Evan's ruined feet, at me bleeding across the driver's seat. "No," she said, "but he can't move. Paul died before rescue crews reached us. Not immediately. For nearly 11 minutes, he remained conscious. He never apologized, never explained the quarry, never told us exactly how he had moved ahead of Lena's car, or why he had returned uphill instead of disappearing into the lower buildings. He kept asking one question: "Where are my boots?" Sometimes he said it to Evan, sometimes to nobody. By the time the first rescue crew arrived from the north, his voice had faded to air moving through damaged lungs. His bare feet rested in the snow beneath the plow wing. The storm began filling our tracks almost as soon as we stopped making them. The first rescuers reached us from the north at 4:18 in the morning. I know the exact time because one of the paramedics said it twice while cutting my pant leg open. 4:18. Tourniquet time is 4:18. He said it for his partner, not me, but the number stayed. They came in on a tracked utility vehicle from the Albany side, 4 people packed behind a windshield filmed with ice. A second team followed on snowmobiles, towing rescue sleds. Their lights appeared above the curve as pale blue flashes, then separated into headlamps, reflective strips, and human voices calling our names. By then, the scene looked less like an attack and more like a machinery accident. Two plow trucks locked together across the road. One cab window broken. A winch cable frayed across the snow. Lena lying on an emergency blanket with her injured arm tucked against her chest. Evan inside Elise's truck, wrapped in silver foil and crying whenever anyone touched his feet. Paul remained pinned between the two vehicles. Snow had covered his hair and shoulders. His footprints were gone. The rescuers did not rush toward him. They approached slowly, following the procedure they used for unstable equipment. One firefighter climbed into my plow and shut down the engine. Another placed heavy cribbing beneath the damaged wing before anyone tried to move it. They checked Paul's pulse through the gap. Nothing. Nobody announced it dramatically. The firefighter simply shook his head toward the medic, then looked away. A paramedic named Curtis knelt beside me. He had a red beard crusted with frozen breath and a strip of duct tape wrapped around one sleeve of his coat. "Daniel, yeah, can you tell me where you are? Hazen Notch. What happened? Cable got me." "That part I see." He cut the fabric away from my calf. The wound was worse than I had let myself believe. It ran diagonally across the muscle, wide enough that I could see yellow tissue beneath the blood. My boot had filled until every movement made a warm, sloshing sensation around my heel. Curtis pressed gauze into the cut. Pain rose through me so fast that my vision narrowed. I grabbed his coat. "Easy," he said. "That is easy. This is the polite version." He packed the wound, wrapped it tightly, then fitted a tourniquet above my knee. When he tightened it, I made a sound I had never heard from myself before. Elise looked over from the rear of her truck. She was sitting upright on a rescue sled, while another medic examined her neck. Purple marks had already formed beneath her jaw. "You good?" she called. I nearly laughed. "Excellent." Her mouth twitched. It was the closest either of us came to joking. Lena was taken first. Her right shoulder had been dislocated by Paul's blow, and 2 ribs were fractured from the crash. Head wound looked frightening, but turned out to be a scalp laceration with a moderate concussion rather than a skull fracture. She kept asking where Evan was even when he answered her from 5 feet away. "I'm here," he told her. A minute later, she asked again. They immobilized her neck and loaded her onto the tracked vehicle. Evan fought the medics, not violently. He pulled his legs away and begged them not to remove the emergency blanket. "You can't warm them fast," he said. "Don't rub them." One of the medics glanced at Elise. "He knows." "Search and rescue training video," Evan whispered. I watched one. They gave him pain medication before examining his feet. The damage extended beyond frostbite. Gravel, glass, road salt, and ice had cut the soles open. 2 toes on his left foot were waxy and hard. When the medic mentioned surgery, Evan stopped speaking. He stared through the broken passenger window at the place where Paul's body was hidden between the trucks. Elise rode with him. Before they loaded her, she caught my sleeve. "Don't tell them you moved the wing on purpose." I looked at her. Why? Because you're in shock. So are you? Yes, but I'm smarter in shock. The county supervisor finally arrived at 5:06, though he had to walk the last quarter mile behind a state trooper. Roy looked 10 years older than he had the previous evening. He wore his regular winter jacket over pajama pants tucked into work boots. Roy Halpern, 54, male, had supervised the highway crew for 12 years and believed nearly every problem could be improved by a checklist. That morning, his hands shook too badly to hold one. He stopped beside my stretcher. Daniel, Roy, I told you to stay in the cab. I did not stay in the cab. No, snow collected in his gray mustache. Then he put one hand on the side rail and squeezed until his knuckles whitened. You're alive. Looks that way. That was not a compliment. I know. The state trooper waited until the medics finished stabilizing me before asking questions. His name was Trooper Aaron Mills, 41, male, and he spoke with the careful neutrality of someone who already knew he was standing inside a future courtroom exhibit. His body camera blinked red. Snow melted on the shoulders of his uniform. Did you intentionally move the plow wing while Mr. Dutcharm was between the vehicles? Yes. Elise, already strapped into the rescue sled, closed her eyes. Mills did not react. Why? He was choking Elise. Lena was down. Evan was moving toward him. I couldn't stand. Were you attempting to kill him? No. What were you attempting to do? Get him off her. Did you believe he posed an immediate threat of serious injury or death? Yes. Why? He had a pry bar. He'd hit Lena. He had Elise by the throat. Mills nodded once. What happened after the wing contacted him? I released the control. Immediately. I think so. You think so. I don't remember how long it took. That was the truth. It might have been 1 second. It might have been 5. In the hospital, that uncertainty became the part I returned to most often. They transported me north because the washout made the southern ambulance route impossible. The trip took over an hour. I lay strapped to a sled for the first section, watching treetops pass above me while snow landed on the plastic shield over my face. At some point, my phone began ringing inside the clear evidence bag clipped to my coat. The screen showed my ex-wife's name, Sarah. I tried to reach for it. Curtis stopped me. We'll call her. I need to. You're losing blood. She'll see the news. She can hear your voice at the hospital. I became angry then, not rationally. I told him he didn't understand, that my daughter would wake up and hear I had been in an accident, that she would think I was dead because adults always used the word accident when they were hiding the worst part. Curtis listened without arguing. Then he held the phone close enough for me to use the voice assistant. Sarah answered on the third ring. Daniel, I'm okay. It was the wrong opening. People only begin with that when they are not okay. What happened? There was a problem on the route. What kind of problem? I hurt my leg. Behind her voice, I heard a television and then the floorboards of our old house creaking. Is Mia awake? No, don't wake her. You just said, I know what I said. Let her sleep. Sarah exhaled. Are you going into surgery? Probably. How bad? I don't know yet. There was a long pause. Were you alone? I looked through the shield at Elise's rescue sled farther up the road. No, that seemed to comfort her. It comforted me too. Surgery lasted 3 hours. The cable had cut through part of the gastrocnemius muscle and damaged a branch of the tibial nerve, but missed the main artery. The surgeon later described that as fortunate. I stopped liking that word. Fortunate was what people called an injury when it could have been fatal. It did not mean minor. It did not mean reversible. For the first month, I could not lift my left heel from the floor. 2 toes stayed numb. Physical therapy began with exercises that looked insulting in their simplicity. Tightening the calf, pointing the foot, moving a towel across the floor with my toes. I did them anyway. Elise was discharged 2 days after the storm. She had bruising around the larynx, a fractured wrist she had not noticed until the adrenaline wore off, and a concussion from striking the truck during the collision. Her voice remained rough for weeks. Lena needed surgery on her shoulder. She recovered slowly and had trouble remembering parts of the night in sequence. In her first formal statement, she insisted that she had never stepped into the road in front of my plow. That detail remained. Investigators believed I had seen Paul instead. From a distance, in heavy snow, his white thermal shirt and Lena's light gray shirt could have appeared similar. Paul may have raised an arm and then dropped below the plow's sightline when I stopped. Lena, injured and disoriented, had likely crawled from the Subaru seconds later. It was plausible, not certain. Plausible was enough for the report. Evan lost the smallest toe on his left foot and part of the next one. The surgeons saved the rest. He spent 2 weeks in the hospital and several months using crutches. He was charged with nothing. He had spoken to a stranger at a gas station. He had made a stupid decision, not a criminal one. It did not stop him from treating it like a sentence. Lena told me he stopped going anywhere alone. He checked the locks twice before bed, then once more after getting into bed. He refused to ride through Hazen Notch, even after the road reopened. The legal review took 4 months. State police reconstructed Paul Dutcharm's movements using security footage, tire tracks, cell tower data, and evidence recovered from the quarry. Paul had stolen a sedan near Newport after leaving the work detail. He abandoned it outside Maurysville when it developed a flat. At the gas station, he heard Evan mention the notch and recognized an isolated route with poor cell coverage. He hid in the cargo area of Lena's Subaru while she and Evan were inside the store. That was how he kept appearing ahead of them. He was not running through the woods or doubling back along impossible shortcuts. He was inside the car, climbing out during stops, approaching from behind, then hiding again while panic made them careless. The 3rd time, Evan saw movement in the rearview mirror and grabbed the wheel. The Subaru crashed. Paul took the keys, removed his prison boots and ankle hardware, and forced Evan to carry them toward the quarry. He believed the abandoned maintenance building contained fuel, tools, and possibly an old pickup truck. It did contain tools. No working vehicle. No hidden money. No accomplice. No larger plan. The mysterious quarry motive turned out to be desperation and outdated knowledge. Paul had worked there briefly on a prison labor crew 6 years earlier. He remembered equipment that had since been removed. His boots were recovered from a drainage channel near the lower scale house. Both were still attached to to pieces of cut restraint chain. That answered the question he kept asking. Mostly. The prosecutor's office ruled that my use of the plow controls was legally justified. The medical examiner found that Paul died from combined crush injuries, internal bleeding from the earlier quarry crash, and hypothermia. Nobody used the phrase self-defense in front of me until the decision was official. Afterward, everyone used it. It did not change the sensation of the hydraulic lever beneath my palm. The county replaced both trucks. Elise returned to work in March, though she switched to day shift. Roy retired the following autumn. I did not return. The nerve damage in my leg gave me a medical reason, but that wasn't the whole truth. Heavy diesel engines made my jaw tighten. Amber beacons turning across a dark room could wake me from sleep. For a while, I worked dispatch. Then I left the department and took a maintenance job at a middle school. The pay was worse. The hours were normal. I saw Mia every Wednesday. Not every other Wednesday. Every one. The first winter after the attack, she asked why I limped more when it snowed. Old injury, I said. She was 9 by then, and no longer accepted incomplete answers without noticing. From the man, Sarah had told her some version. Yes. Did he try to kill you? I don't know. Did you kill him? Children find the shortest path to the question adults circle. I sat beside her on the front steps while salt trucks moved along the main road below. Their amber lights flashed through the bare trees. I stopped him, I said. That isn't what I asked. No, she waited. Yes, I said. Her boots rested beside mine. Purple, insulated, expensive enough that Sarah had complained, and then bought them anyway. Mia leaned against my arm. She did not tell me it was okay. I was grateful for that. 3 years have passed. The washout has been repaired. The quarry gate was replaced with concrete barriers. Paul's name appeared in the news for about a week, and then disappeared beneath newer tragedies. Elise and I still talk, usually about ordinary things. Her truck, my leg, Roy's blood pressure. Evan enrolled in a community college welding program. Lena moved to Burlington and works from home because long drives make her anxious. We do not discuss footprints often. There is nothing left to explain. Snow shifts under plow turbulence. Amber lights create gaps. Curves shorten distance. Fear edits memory. A human being can move close to a large vehicle without being seen if the driver is watching the road, the blade, the mirrors, the gauges, and everything except the narrow strip beside the door. All true. Last January, I drove through Hazen Notch for the first time since that night. Daylight, clear weather, Mia in the passenger seat. We were headed to a ski hill, and the main highway was backed up. At the repaired quarry entrance, she asked why I had slowed down. I used to work here. On this road. Yeah. The new guardrail shone cleanly above the culvert. Concrete barriers blocked the old access. Beyond them, the lower road had grown over with spruce saplings. Nothing moved. I kept driving. Half a mile later, Mia twisted in her seat. Dad, what? Did we pass someone? I checked the mirrors. The road behind us was empty. Where? Back by the quarry. What did they look like? She shrugged. I only saw their feet. I slowed again, then stopped myself from touching the brake. The afternoon sun flashed between trees. Old plow ridges along the shoulder had melted into shapes that could be tracks or shadows or nothing at all. "What kind of shoes?" I asked. Mia looked back once more. "I don't think they had any." We drove on. I did not turn around. That's it for this nightmare. If you enjoyed it, please like the video, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and turn on notifications. It really helps keep the stories alive. And don't stop here, dive into another one of our videos and keep the fear going. Hey friends, it's your girl Mia. This is Mia Horror Stories, and tonight's story I guard a graveyard, but someone keeps digging up graves that aren't there as told in darkness. The screen will stay black, so you can simply listen, imagine, and feel every moment without distraction. Trust me, the build-up matters, and the ending is where the real chill hides. So don't look away, and don't leave early. The hole was too clean to have been made by an animal. That was the first thing I noticed as I stood beside it at 2:17 in the morning, shining my flashlight into 6 feet of dark soil, where the cemetery map said there should have been nothing except an unused strip of grass. The sides had been cut almost straight. Roots hung from the walls in pale, snapped threads. At the bottom lay a square of black plastic, stretched flat beneath a dusting of dirt, as if someone had covered something and then changed their mind about burying it. A fox could dig deep. A badger could shift an astonishing amount of earth. Neither one used a shovel. My name is Daniel Mercer. I was 38 years old then, male, divorced, and employed as the overnight security guard at St. Bartholomew's Cemetery in western Pennsylvania. People hear graveyard guard and imagine me pacing between leaning stones with a lantern. But most of my job involved checking padlocks, chasing teenagers away from the old receiving vault, and reporting branches that came down across the maintenance roads. The cemetery sat outside New Castle, 40 minutes north of Pittsburgh, where abandoned mills stood along the Shenango River, and the wooded hills seemed to absorb sound after midnight. I had been working there for 11 months. It wasn't my first choice. It wasn't anybody's first choice. I had taken the job because the hours let me pick up my daughter from school 3 days a week, and because the company that handled security didn't ask too many questions about the 18-month gap in my employment history. I told people I'd been caring for my father. That was partly true. The part I left out was that after he died, I spent 6 months barely leaving his house, and another 6 pretending I was ready to return to normal work. I wasn't frightened of the dead. I was frightened of being responsible when something went wrong. That distinction mattered to me. The eastern section of St. Bartholomew's had been closed to new burials since the late 90s. The stones there belonged to mill families, railroad men, infants lost during influenza seasons, and women whose names had been reduced to somebody's wife or daughter. The newer grounds stretched west toward a row of red maples and a drainage pond that smelled of algae in summer. Between the sections ran a narrow asphalt road, patched so many times it looked stitched together. The hole was beside that road, 20 yards north of a stone angel with no hands. I moved the flashlight slowly over the edges. There were shoe impressions in the loose soil. Not full prints, just heel marks and blurred pressure lines where someone had stood close to the rim. One of them had a wedge-shaped cut through the tread. I took out my phone and photographed everything before touching it. The flash flattened the scene into ugly detail: the wet clay, the torn grass, the shovel bites running down the walls. My radio crackled against my jacket. "Mercer, you awake?" The voice belonged to Linda Carver, age 56, female, the cemetery's operations manager. Linda had been responsible for St. Bartholomew's long enough to remember when the office records were kept on index cards in metal drawers. She wore her gray hair cropped close, smoked behind the equipment shed despite claiming she had quit, and treated all emergencies with the same tired irritation, whether they involved vandalism, a burst irrigation line, or a family demanding to know why a headstone had arrived in the wrong shade of granite. I pressed the radio button. "I'm in Eastfield. At this hour, I assumed you weren't at home. There's a hole near the Caraway plot." A pause. "How big?" "About 6 feet long, maybe 3 wide." The radio hissed. Then Linda said, "You'd better start over." I looked back into it. It's grave-sized. This time the pause was longer. "Is there a stone?" "No." "Marker?" "No." "Fresh burial flag?" "No." "Then it's probably maintenance." "Maintenance doesn't dig overnight." "Maintenance does all kinds of things without telling me." I could hear paper moving on her end. She lived in a small house across the road from the cemetery's south gate, close enough that she kept a radio on her nightstand whenever I worked alone. "Don't climb into it," she said. "I wasn't planning to. You always sound like you're planning to do the thing I'm telling you not to do." I took photos. "Good. Put cones around it. We'll look after sunrise." I aimed the beam at the black plastic at the bottom. "There's something down there. Define something. Sheeting. Maybe a tarp. Could be erosion control." In a rectangular hole, "Daniel." Her tone tightened around my name. That was Linda's way of warning me that curiosity was not listed in my job description. A gust moved through the maples behind me. Their bare branches clicked together like wooden knitting needles. Somewhere near the drainage pond, a pump switched on with a low mechanical hum. The sound traveled across the open ground and made the night feel more industrial than rural. "I'll cone it off," I said. "Then finish your route." She released the radio button. I stayed beside the hole. The cemetery had 6 security cameras. 4 covered the gates and office buildings. 1 watched the Veterans Memorial because bronze flag holders had been stolen twice. The last one faced the Mausoleum Drive. Eastfield had no coverage. Linda had requested 2 additional cameras the previous spring, but the parish board had decided the cost was excessive. I circled the hole carefully. A shovel lay in the weeds 10 feet away. It was a short-handled spade with a yellow fiberglass grip, the kind our grounds crew kept on their utility carts. Mud coated the blade. A strip of red tape had been wrapped around the shaft below the handle. I recognized it. Every maintenance tool at St. Bartholomew's had colored tape marking which shed it belonged to. Red meant the lower equipment building near the south wall. The shed was locked, or it had been when I checked it at midnight. I took another photo, then used my sleeve to pick up the shovel by the end of the handle. Not because I thought there would be fingerprints. I had watched enough television to know surfaces outdoors rarely gave police anything useful, and enough actual police reports to know they might not come at all for a disturbed patch of cemetery land. Still, I didn't want my handprint to be the only clear one. I carried the shovel back toward the road. Headlights appeared between the trees. For a second, I thought Linda had decided to come over. Then, I saw the vehicle turn through the east maintenance entrance, which should have been chained after 6. It was a cemetery pickup. The truck rolled slowly toward me, suspension creaking over the patched asphalt, an amber beacon unlit on its roof. When it stopped, the driver's window came down. Evan Rourke, age 24, male, leaned across the seat and looked at the shovel in my hand. Evan was one of the groundskeepers, broad-shouldered and perpetually tired, with a trimmed red beard and a habit of answering questions as if every conversation were delaying something more important. He worked mornings, usually arriving around 5:30, never at 2 in the morning. "What happened?" he asked. "That's what I was going to ask you." He looked past me toward the cones I had not yet placed. "You find the washout." "The what?" He switched off the engine. For a few moments, the only sound was the metal tick of the cooling truck and the distant pump. Evan climbed out wearing sweatpants, work boots, and a black hooded sweatshirt. No uniform. His hair was flattened on one side. "Linda called me," he said. "She called you before she called me back. She said you found a hole. She called you in under 5 minutes." He shut the door harder than necessary. "My apartment's 12 minutes away. It's 2:25. I know how clocks work." He started past me. I raised the shovel slightly. "This yours?" He stopped. The irritation left his face, not dramatically, but enough that I noticed. "Where'd you get that?" "In the weeds." He took a step closer, studying the red tape. "That came from the lower shed." "I know, the shed was locked." "I know that too." He rubbed his thumb along his lower lip. Evan had a nervous habit of checking his pockets when he didn't know what to say. Right pocket, left pocket, back pocket. He did it then. "You open it?" I asked. "No. Did anyone from maintenance come back tonight?" "No one's supposed to." That wasn't the question. His eyes moved toward East Field. "I left at 4:30, he said. "Mateo left before me. Carl had the day off." "Who has keys?" "Me, Linda, Carl. Maybe the parish office." "Maybe. I don't manage the keys." I watched him walk to the hole. He stopped at the edge and stared down for several seconds. Then he said, "That's not a washout." "No." "Why did Linda say it was?" "She didn't." Evan glanced at me. "I thought you said she called about a hole." "She did. You're the one who called it a washout." The muscles in his jaw shifted. He crouched at the rim, careful not to step on the clearest heel mark. The beam from my flashlight cut over his shoulder and struck the plastic at the bottom. From that angle, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. There were metal eyelets along one edge. It wasn't construction sheeting. It was a body bag. Not necessarily one that had held a body. Funeral homes and hospitals used them. So did disaster teams, medical examiners, and companies that sold supplies online to anyone with a credit card. It could have been discarded, stolen, used as a liner. Those were all explanations. They just weren't comforting ones. Evan stood. "We should cover it," I looked at him. Cover what? The hole, temporarily. Why? Because someone could fall in. That's what the cones are for. Animals could get into it. What animals? He stared at the bottom again. Daniel, I don't know. His voice had changed. It had lost the impatient edge and become quieter, almost careful. I asked, is there supposed to be a grave here? No, you're sure? This strip's never been opened. How do you know? Utility lines. He pointed toward the road. Old water main runs through here. That's why the graves stop at the Angel. I looked north and south. He was right. The rows ended unevenly, leaving a broad, empty band beside the pavement. So whoever dug this, I said, picked a place where nobody would be buried. Looks that way. Why? Evan didn't answer. A light came on in the distance, near the cemetery office. Seconds later, another vehicle entered through the main gate. Linda's Buick moved fast enough that its tires kicked gravel onto the asphalt. She parked crosswise behind the truck and got out wearing jeans, a winter coat over her pajamas, and rubber garden clogs. She took one look at the hole. Then she looked at Evan. You said it would be smaller. No one spoke. Linda closed her eyes briefly. It was not the reaction of someone seeing the scene for the first time. I lowered the shovel. What exactly did he tell you? I asked. Linda turned toward me. Her face had the pale, drawn look of someone who had come outside too quickly after waking, but her eyes were sharp. Daniel, we need to handle this carefully. You knew about it. I knew there might be disturbed ground. You called Evan before I reported it. She glanced at him. That glance told me more than either of them had. Evan stepped back from the edge. I told her I thought somebody had been out here, he said. When? Yesterday. You thought that because... He checked his pockets again. Linda answered for him. A tool was missing. The shovel and a tamping bar, Evan said. Linda gave him a look. What's a tamping bar for? I asked. Packing soil or breaking it. Daniel, Linda said. The correct response here is to secure the area and call the police. That wasn't your response 5 minutes ago. I needed to see it. You told me to finish my route. Because I didn't want you standing alone beside an excavation when we didn't know who made it. The explanation was reasonable. That was the problem. Every explanation that night was reasonable by itself. Together, they didn't fit. Linda pulled out her phone. The screen lit her face blue-white. I'm calling County Dispatch, she said. Evan immediately said, wait. Linda froze with her thumb above the screen. He looked toward the body bag. There's something else. A truck passed on the county road beyond the cemetery wall, air brakes coughing as it slowed for the bend. Its headlights moved through gaps in the trees and briefly swept across the stones, making the polished granite flash one row at a time. Evan spoke after the sound faded. This isn't the first hole. Linda lowered the phone. I thought of the map in the office, the rows of numbered plots, the unused sections shaded green. How many? I asked. Evan looked at Linda instead of me. She gave a small shake of her head. That frightened me more than the body bag, not because it suggested anything impossible. It suggested paperwork, concealment, a decision made during daylight hours by people who had convinced themselves they could manage a problem without involving anyone outside the cemetery. Evan said, 2 that I know of. Where? One near the old chapel, one behind the north wall. I walked those sections every night. They were filled back in. By who? Neither answered. Linda looked down at her phone again. "We call the sheriff," she said. Evan shook his head. "Not until we check the records." "What records?" I asked. "The old burial ledgers." Linda stared at him. Evan swallowed. "The holes aren't random," he said. "I think they match plots." I pointed toward the empty strip. "There is no plot here." "I know." "Then what does it match?" He looked past me, toward the office where the records were stored in a basement room that smelled of damp cardboard and mouse poison. "A number," he said. "Just not one on the current map." Linda stood between us with the phone in her hand. We had two choices: call the sheriff and hand them a fresh excavation, a stolen shovel, and a cemetery manager who had already withheld information, or go into the records room first and find out what Evan thought had been buried on paper, even if nothing had ever been buried in the ground. Linda looked at me. "Daniel," she said, "you're not obligated to come inside." The eastern gate stood open behind us. I could have driven out, called dispatch myself, and let daylight sort through whatever they had hidden. Instead, I looked once more into the grave that wasn't supposed to exist. At the bottom, the body bag shifted slightly as trapped air escaped beneath the plastic. A soft, slow crinkling rose from the hole. Evan stepped away. Linda tightened her grip on the phone, and I had to decide whether I trusted the police more than the two people who had already lied to me, or whether I needed to know what name belonged to an empty piece of ground before anyone else arrived. I chose the records room. I told myself it was because the sheriff would ask for the same information: plot numbers, burial permits, maps, names. If we could hand over a clean explanation with the photographs, maybe the whole thing would stay orderly. That was the word I used in my head. Orderly, not hidden. Linda locked the eastern gate behind us while Evan drove the maintenance truck back toward the office. I followed in my security sedan with the shovel sealed inside 2 contractor bags from the trunk. The bags were thin and bright orange, meant for wet uniforms or trash, not evidence, but leaving the shovel beside the hole seemed worse. As I drove, I called county dispatch. I did not give them everything. That decision still bothers me. I reported suspected vandalism and an unauthorized excavation. I said no human remains were visible. I said the site had been secured and asked for a deputy. The dispatcher told me the overnight unit was handling a domestic disturbance near Elwood City and a vehicle crash on Route 18. Someone would come when available. "How long?" I asked. "I can't provide an estimate, sir." "Is there a crime scene unit available for vandalism?" "There may be more to it." "What kind of more?" I watched Linda's Buick turn toward the office. "I don't know yet." The dispatcher repeated my callback number and told me not to disturb the scene. By then, I had already moved the shovel. The office was a 1-story brick building built in 1974, though the basement was older, left over from a stone caretaker's house, demolished after mine's subsidence cracked the foundation. Fluorescent lights buzzed in the main room. A coffee maker sat on a filing cabinet beside a stack of funeral programs held down by a ceramic angel. Linda used the bathroom first. Evan stood at the front window, watching the dark outside. I placed the bagged shovel on the tile near the reception counter. "Deputy's coming," I said. "When?" Linda called through the bathroom door. "They wouldn't say." "Did you mention the bag?" "No." Evan looked over his shoulder. "Why not?" "Because I haven't opened it." "You said it was a body bag." "I said it looked like one." "You know what those look like. My father died at home." The answer came out sharper than I intended. Evan turned back to the window. The toilet flushed. Linda came out drying her hands on her pajama pants. She had removed her coat, revealing a faded t-shirt from a cemetery convention in Harrisburg. The ordinariness of it made the last half hour seem briefly ridiculous. 3 adults standing under office lights, arguing about a hole. Then the desk phone rang. All of us jumped a little. Linda picked it up, sent Bartholomew S. She listened. Her expression changed. "What time?" Evan turned from the window. Linda said, "No, don't send them away. Tell them there's been a scheduling issue. Offer coffee, I'll call you back." She hung up. "What?" I asked. "A funeral. At 2:30 in the morning, not now, 8 o'clock. She checked the wall clock. It was 2:46. "Whose?" "Brennan. Full burial. Church service at 7, graveside at 8. Evan swore under his breath. Linda ignored him. "What's wrong with the Brennan burial?" I asked. "The grave hasn't been opened." I looked at Evan. He nodded once. "We were supposed to do it yesterday afternoon," he said. "Why didn't you?" "Excavator broke a hydraulic line." "You have another one." Carl took it to the repair yard. Linda went behind the reception desk and started opening drawers. "The funeral home confirmed the burial on Monday," she said. "The family has relatives coming from Ohio and Maryland. We cannot postpone it because our equipment failed." That sounds like a daytime problem. It becomes a nighttime problem when there are 5 hours left. Evan rubbed both hands over his face. "I can open it with the backhoe if the hose holds. You said the hydraulic line broke. I replaced the section. The fitting's still leaking." "How badly?" "It loses pressure after 10 minutes. Linda found a ring of keys and set it on the counter. "Work in intervals." "That's not how hydraulics work. I know enough to know the machine moves. It moves until the boom drops." The fluorescent light above us flickered once, then steadied. Linda took a breath through her nose. "Evan, the Brennan family buried their mother here in 2019. The father is going beside her. The vault company arrives at 6:30. We need that grave open before then. Then call another cemetery and rent equipment. At 3 in the morning, call Carl." I did. His phone is off. "Drive to his house. He lives in Butler." Their voices were climbing, not shouting yet. They knew each other too well for that. The anger had a practiced shape, fitted around older disagreements. I stepped between the problem and myself. "What does this have to do with the old ledgers?" Linda looked at me as though I had asked why the building had walls. "Everything now has to happen at once," she said. "We check the records. Evan opens Brennan. You remain available for the deputy." "No," both of them stared at me. "I'm not staying here alone while he takes a failing machine into the cemetery." "I've used it like this before," Evan said. "That doesn't improve the situation." Linda picked up the keys again. "Daniel, this burial has to be ready, and the hole has to remain secured." "It is secured. With cones. You chained the gate." The chain was open when Evan came in. Linda stopped moving. Evan said, "I used my key." You said the gate should have been chained. It was. Then how did the person who dug the hole get in? He looked at Linda. She looked at the keys. There were 8 keys on the ring. Brass, silver, one with a black plastic head. A rectangular label attached to it had been written over so many times the ink had turned into a gray smear. Linda said, "We need to check the key log." "You have a key log?" I asked. "In the records room." "Of course it is." The basement door stood beside the copier. Linda unlocked it and switched on the stair light. Yellow illumination reached halfway down before giving way to shadow. The smell rose immediately. Damp paper, concrete dust, old mouse droppings. She started down. Evan stayed where he was. "You coming?" she asked. "I need to get the backhoe warmed up. You need to show us the numbering system." "I can show you the ledger page." "Then show us." He checked the wall clock. "Every minute we stand here is a minute I don't have." Linda looked close to saying something cruel. I recognized the moment because I had lived through hundreds like it during my marriage, the exact second when a useful argument becomes a personal one. I said, 10 minutes. We check the page. Then Evan goes. Linda continued down. Evan followed. I went last. The basement ceiling was low enough that a heating duct passed inches above my head. Metal shelving formed 3 narrow aisles packed with burial registers, tax documents, old parish bulletins, and cardboard boxes marked with years. A dehumidifier hummed in the corner, its collection light glowing red. "Tank's full," I said. "It's always full by morning," Linda replied. Water had condensed on the painted block walls. The floor near the far shelves looked darker than the rest. Evan moved to a steel cabinet with shallow map drawers. He pulled open the 4th one. Inside lay rolled plans, aerial photographs, and tracing paper so old it had browned around the edges. He selected a folded map and carried it to a work table. Linda cleared away a box of rubber grave markers. The map showed the cemetery before the western expansion. It was hand-drawn in black ink, with plot blocks marked by letters and narrow numbers written between rows. Some sections matched the current layout. Others did not. Evan pointed to the eastern road. "This is where tonight's hole is." His finger rested on a blank strip. "There's no number," I said, "on this layer." He unfolded a second sheet. This one showed proposed drainage and service lines. Blue pencil traced the old water main. Red pencil marked areas labeled reserved. Evan aligned the 2 maps against the table edge. Then he pointed again. A small notation sat beneath the water line. E14. "The hole's near here," he said. "E14 is a plot," I asked. "It shouldn't be." Linda leaned closer. "What does the E stand for?" "East, probably." That section was never assigned letters. Not on the public map. I looked at her. Public map. Linda's lips compressed. "There are internal planning maps. Every cemetery has them." "Do they usually include graves nobody can see?" "No." The dehumidifier shut off. The sudden absence of its hum made another sound clear. Water dripping. Not from the walls. Somewhere inside the shelving. I angled my flashlight between the rows. A thin stream ran beneath the bottom shelf toward a floor drain clogged with gray lint and bits of paper. "Pipe leak?" I asked. Linda came around the table. The stream widened while we watched. Evan said, "That's not a pipe." A soft tapping started overhead. Rain. I had not heard it begin through the insulated office, but it struck the small basement window in quick, hard ticks. Linda checked her phone. Storm wasn't supposed to arrive until morning. Evan crouched near the drain. "This is groundwater." "From where?" I asked. "The slope above the office. If the drain's backed up, it comes through the wall." The cemetery lay on terraced ground. East Field was higher than the office by nearly 20 feet. The maintenance road sloped down from it, channeling runoff toward the building, toward the basement. Linda grabbed a wooden broom and pushed at the drain. Black water burped through the grate. Then the basement lights went out. A relay clicked somewhere above us. The emergency bulb over the stairs came on, weak and amber. The rain drummed harder against the window. Evan stood. "We need the maps upstairs." Linda started gathering sheets. I used my phone light to scan the shelves. Water was already spreading across the floor, shallow but fast, turning loose labels transparent. "How often does this flood?" I asked. "Not since the drain line was replaced." "When was that?" 2016. "Who replaced it?" "Carl." Evan pulled 2 boxes from the bottom shelf and placed them on the table. "These need to move." Linda looked at the room. For the first time, she seemed unsure where to begin. There were hundreds of boxes, thousands of records. The water reached the soles of my boots. "Forget everything except plot maps, burial ledgers, and key logs," I said. Linda nodded, grateful to be given an order she didn't have to invent. "The leather registers," she said. "North wall, green spines." We moved quickly. Evan stacked ledgers on the stairs. I carried map drawers one at a time because they were awkward and heavier than they looked. Linda searched the filing cabinet for key records, muttering dates under her breath. The emergency light flickered. My phone rang. County Dispatch. I answered while lifting a ledger from the lowest shelf. "Mercer, Mr. Mercer, this is Lawrence County Dispatch. The responding deputy has been diverted to an injury collision. Is the suspect still on scene?" "No suspect." "Any immediate threat?" I looked at the rising water. "Not from a person. Have you found human remains?" "No, that was technically true. The dispatcher said the call would remain pending." "How long?" "I still can't give you an estimate." Behind me, Linda dropped a box. Paper folders scattered into the water. She said a word I had never heard her use. I ended the call and knelt to help. The water was icy through the knees of my trousers. Funeral permits, invoices, and photocopied death certificates floated around our hands. Ink curled off one page in blue threads. "This is exactly why we digitize things," I said. "We started," Linda replied. "When?" 2018. "How far did you get?" B as in section B. B as in surnames beginning with B. Evan gave a humorless laugh. The rain intensified. Water pushed through the block seam in 3 separate streams now, carrying grit and tiny pale worms. I gathered the wet files into a plastic bin. Linda pulled open the bottom drawer of the cabinet. Inside were key sign out sheets clipped by year. She flipped through them fast. "Current years missing." "Where should it be?" I asked. "Here, could it be upstairs?" "No," Evan stopped stacking ledgers. "What exactly is on the key sheet?" "Names, dates, which keys were issued." "You sign keys out to volunteers, to contractors, parish staff." Monument companies. The East Gate key, I asked. Linda thumbed through the previous year's pages. Sometimes. How many copies exist? I don't know. The answer landed badly. Evan turned away. You run the cemetery. I inherited 50 years of informal systems and 3 generations of people making copies whenever they pleased. And you never changed the locks, not all of them. Which ones? She did not answer. The emergency light blinked again. This time it stayed off for 2 full seconds before returning. We're done, I said. Take what we have upstairs. Linda resisted. The interment index is still here. What index? She pointed to a row of narrow black binders on the lowest shelf at the far end of the basement. Water had reached them. Evan waded over first. Leave them, I said. They cross-reference every burial by plot, Linda said. Without them, the old ledgers take days to search. Evan bent and lifted the first binder. The shelf shifted. It made a small metallic squeal. Then the entire unit leaned toward him. I saw it happen slowly enough to understand it, and too quickly to stop it. Move, Evan turned. The top shelf spilled first. Boxes struck his shoulder and back. He stumbled in the water, caught his boot against the table leg, and went down on one knee. The shelving followed. I grabbed the upright with both hands. The weight drove me backward. Metal cut into my palms through my gloves. Linda pushed from the other side, shouting Evan's name. He crawled clear. The shelf struck the table instead of the floor, pinning it at an angle. For a moment, nobody moved. Rain hammered overhead. Water ran around my boots. Evan sat against the wall, holding his left wrist. You broken? I asked. Don't know. Move your fingers. He did. His face tightened. Probably sprained. Linda crouched beside him. You hit your head. No. Back. No. He tried to stand and stopped. My ankle. I shone the light down. Right boot was wedged beneath a collapsed cardboard box. When he pulled it free, he could put weight on the foot, but not much. No obvious deformity. That was the good news. The bad news was the clock. 3:31 a.m., the grave for the Brennan burial still had not been opened. The backhoe was unreliable. The groundskeeper who knew how to operate it could barely walk. Linda looked at the time too. You can still run the controls sitting down, she said. Evan stared at her. That's what you have to say. I'm asking. No, you're not. We have 3 hours. I just had a shelf fall on me, and a family will be here at 8. He pushed himself upright using the wall. Daniel, I thought, do something. That old panic started behind my ribs, the same sensation I used to get when my father called from the bathroom floor, or when my daughter ran a fever, or when my ex-wife asked a simple question about money, and I knew every answer was inadequate. Being responsible never felt like authority. It felt like choosing which failure would belong to you. I looked at Evan. Can you operate the backhoe without using your right foot? Throttle's hand controlled. Brake is. Then no. Linda started to object. I cut her off. I'll do it. Both of them looked at me. Evan said, you ever run a backhoe? Not since I was 19. Doing what? Landscaping crew. That's not the same machine. It had controls and a bucket. That description includes a spoon. Can you talk me through it? He shifted his weight and winced. Yes, Linda said, then we move now. I pointed at the ledgers on the stairs. You take these upstairs. Call the vault company. Tell them to delay. They won't. Tell them anyway. The main office lights came back on above us. A second later, an alarm began beeping. Not the security panel. The fire alarm. 3 sharp chirps, pause, 3 sharp chirps. Linda looked toward the ceiling. There's no smoke. Could be water in the electrical room, Evan said. The smell reached us then. Hot insulation. Faint, bitter, unmistakable. I helped Evan toward the stairs while Linda carried the ledgers. We climbed into the office and found a haze near the ceiling above the copier. The rain had forced water through the conduit beside the back wall. It ran into a power strip where the copier, dehumidifier, and a space heater had all been plugged together. The strip sparked as we watched. I crossed the room and pulled the main breaker. Everything went black except the emergency exit signs. The fire alarm died. So did the heat, the office phone, the computer, the charging cradle for my radio. Outside, the cemetery vanished into rain and darkness. Linda stood in the beam of my flashlight, clutching a stack of old burial ledgers against her chest. Evan leaned against the reception counter, unable to put full weight on his ankle. I called the fire department from my cell. While I was speaking, the security panel's backup battery began chirping. A different sound, a warning. Then the panel announced in a flat electronic voice, Zone 3, East Service Gate, open. We all looked toward the front windows. The gate I had chained less than an hour earlier was open again. I told the dispatcher to add possible trespassers. Then headlights appeared beyond the rain, not on the county road, inside the cemetery. They moved slowly along the eastern maintenance lane, passing between the stones toward the unfinished hole. One vehicle, no beacon, no headlights bright enough for a work truck, just 2 low beams weaving through the rows. Evan pushed away from the counter. That's not ours. Linda set the ledgers down. The headlights stopped. From somewhere out in East Field came the faint metallic strike of a tool biting into wet ground. Once, a pause, then again. The person who had dug the grave had come back before the police could get there. And with the basement flooding, the office without power, Evan injured, and a real burial due in a few hours, we no longer had the option of watching safely from a distance. The fire dispatcher told us not to approach the vehicle. That was the correct instruction. I ignored it less than a minute later. Not completely. I didn't walk straight into East Field with my flashlight held out like a target. I told Linda to stay in the office with the ledgers and call the funeral home. I told Evan to sit down, elevate his ankle, and keep his phone on speaker so he could guide me through the cemetery roads if I lost sight of the vehicle. Then I took the security sedan. Daniel, Linda said as I opened the door, the fire department is coming. So is the deputy. We don't know when. That's my point. You are not law enforcement. I'm the one being paid to stop trespassers. You're being paid to observe and report. I looked out through the rain-streaked glass. The low headlights had disappeared behind the rise between the office and East Field, but the digging continued. Metal into soil. A pause. Another strike. Observe and report felt inadequate. So did everything else. I took the radio from its charger, even though the office power was dead. The battery indicator showed 2 bars. My phone showed 43%. I grabbed the heavy maglite, a reflective rain shell, and the first aid pouch from the security cabinet. Evan shifted against the counter. If you go up the central drive, they'll see you before you see them. What route? Take the lower maintenance lane behind the equipment sheds. It curves north along the wall, then climbs past the old chapel. You can come down toward East Field from above. How muddy? In this rain, bad. Any chance I get stuck? Yes. Good. That wasn't sarcasm. I closed the office door behind me. The rain hit harder outside than it sounded from indoors. It bounced off the sedan roof in dense, metallic bursts and ran cold beneath my collar before I reached the driver's side. The cemetery's main avenue stretched west from the office, lined by old oaks and stone family monuments. Without the security lights, the road appeared only where my headlights reached it, then vanished behind me. I turned south instead. The lower lane passed between the maintenance garage and the concrete block tool shed. Both buildings were dark. Water poured from a broken gutter on the garage roof and struck a metal drum with a hollow, irregular banging. For 3 seconds, I thought someone was hitting the side of the building. I stopped the sedan. The banging continued. Bang. Pause. Bang, bang. I angled the headlights toward the garage and saw the drum rocking in the runoff. That was all. My hands still tightened on the wheel. I continued north along the wall. The lane narrowed to one vehicle's width, with the cemetery boundary on my left and a steep wooded bank on my right. The wall was old fieldstone, patched in sections with concrete. Beyond it lay a county access road and a drainage ditch. Water coursed over the lane in muddy sheets. Evan's voice came through my phone. You should be beside the veterans section. I am. Chapel S ahead. The old chapel had not held services in 20 years. It was a narrow sandstone building with boarded windows and a bell tower too weak to support the bell. The first of the earlier false holes had been found somewhere behind it. I slowed as I passed. The sedan's headlights swept across the rear wall. For an instant, a person stood beneath the chapel eaves. Tall, narrow, head bowed. I hit the brakes. The figure swung toward me. My stomach clenched. Then the wind pulled the plastic farther loose, and I saw what it was. A black tarp wrapped around scaffolding, tied at the middle. The chapel roof had been inspected the previous week. Water had pooled in the tarp, making the upper section sag like shoulders. Daniel, Evan said, scaffolding. What? Nothing. I drove on. The lane rose after the chapel, climbing toward North Terrace. From there, the cemetery spread below in dark tiers. The office lay southeast, its red exit sign faint in the rain. East Field sat across the central road, bordered on one side by the handless angel, and on the other by a line of bare maples. The excavation was hidden behind a slight ridge. I switched off the headlights. The engine idled roughly. From the darkness below came the scrape of a shovel dragged over stone. I picked up the radio. Linda, do you copy? Static. Then her voice faint. Barely. I'm above East Field. Keep the office doors locked. Fire department says 6 minutes. Deputy. Still pending. Call me if the panel announces another gate. The radio crackled. Daniel, don't be stupid. Too late. I eased the sedan downhill, the parking lights off. The road curved east around a group of marble obelisks. Water ran down the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it, and I had to lean forward to see the lane. Halfway down, the rear tire slid. The sedan shifted sideways. I steered into it, felt nothing. Then the tires caught hard enough to throw my shoulder against the door. Right wheels dropped off the asphalt into soft ground. I stopped, tried reverse. The wheels spun. Mud struck the underside of the car. I tried again with less throttle. The sedan moved an inch, maybe two, then settled deeper. First attempt. I had meant to approach quietly and leave myself a quick route back. Instead, I had buried the security car 50 yards above the person I was trying to surprise. I switched off the engine. "You stuck?" Evan asked through the phone. "Yes. I told you. Be useful. Don't spin the tires anymore. You'll sink to the axle." "I'm already close." "Where are you?" "Below North Terrace, East Curve. That's the soft shoulder. Walk from there." "I plan to." "No, you plan to drive." I ended the call. The rain muffled my steps as I moved downhill. I kept the flashlight off and used the reflected orange glow from the county road beyond the wall to orient myself. At the bottom of the slope, I heard voices. 2 people. One spoke softly, too low for words. The other answered in a sharper whisper. I crouched behind a family monument engraved with the name VCCHIO. The unknown vehicle was parked on the maintenance lane beside the excavation. It was a dark SUV, older, with one brake light glowing dimly, even though the engine appeared off. The rear hatch stood open. A man was inside the hole. Another figure stood above him, holding a flashlight pointed downward. I could not see either face. The man in the grave said, "It's underneath." The person above said, "Then move the bag." "Help me." "No, you wanted it gone." The flashlight shifted. The beam struck the black plastic. The bag was no longer flat. One end had been pulled upward, exposing something pale beneath it. Not bone, wood, a board. I took out my phone and began recording. Rainwater ran across the screen. The camera struggled to focus. I zoomed once, lost the image, and zoomed back. The man in the grave hooked his fingers through one of the metal eyelets and dragged the bag aside. The plastic tore. A smell reached me even through the rain. Sweet and chemical, not decay. Fuel, maybe. Solvent. The person above stepped back. "Careful, you could come down here." I said no. The man shoved his shovel beneath the exposed board. It lifted. Something metallic struck the bottom of the hole. A hollow clang. I shifted to get a better angle. My boot pressed into saturated ground. The earth gave way beneath my heel. I slid down the back of the monument, knocked loose a brass flower vase, and sent it rolling across the road. The vase rang against the asphalt. Both figures froze. The flashlight swung toward me. "Who's there?" I stood and turned on the maglight. "Cemetery security. Step away from the hole." It sounded more official than I felt. The person above the grave raised an arm to block the light. Heavy coat, hood, work gloves. The man in the hole ducked low, kept the beam on the standing figure. Hands where I can see them. "You got a gun?" the figure asked. The voice was male. No, that was honest and probably unwise. He laughed once, then back up. The rear door of the SUV opened. A third person stepped out. I had not known anyone was inside. changed the numbers and the shape of the situation instantly. The third person was smaller, wearing a light-colored jacket. They moved around the vehicle toward me, one hand hidden near their waist. I backed behind the monument. "Linda," I said into the radio, "3 trespassers in East Field, dark SUV. Send that to dispatch now." Static answered. The man in the grave climbed out using the shovel as support. The third figure kept coming. I raised the maglite. "Stop." They stopped 15 feet away. The person pulled their hood back. A woman, maybe in her 30s. Rain flattened dark hair against her face. "I need you to listen," she said. "Stay where you are. We're not here to hurt you." The man holding the shovel says otherwise. He won't use it. Behind her, the man with the shovel said, "Don't promise things for me." The woman glanced back. That small disagreement told me they were not as controlled as they wanted to appear. She looked at me again. "You need to leave before the ground goes." "What ground?" "The main. The old water line." A low vibration passed beneath my feet. I felt it before I heard it. A dull, underground thump. The surface of the hole shivered. Mud slid from one wall. The woman stepped back quickly. "Move away from the edge." The man in the excavation area grabbed the torn body bag and pulled. The exposed board shifted. Water sprayed upward through the soil beneath it. Not a trickle, a pressurized jet. It struck the side of the hole and cut a channel through the clay. The man stumbled. The woman shouted, "Get out." He jumped for the rim. The hooded man grabbed his jacket and hauled him up as the wall collapsed inward. The excavation filled from below. Dirty water churned around the plastic, lifting it. The black bag rolled over once, revealing white stenciled letters on its underside. County Emergency Management. Then it disappeared beneath the muddy surge. The old water main had ruptured. The road cracked along the edge of the hole with a sharp report. I ran uphill. Everyone did. The ground behind us sagged, not dramatically, but enough to pull a section of asphalt downward. The SUV's rear wheels dropped into the forming depression. The driver shouted. He ran back and climbed in. The engine started. He accelerated. The front wheels spun on the wet road. The SUV shifted sideways toward the hole. "Stop," the woman yelled. He accelerated harder. The rear wheel sank another 6 inches. Second attempt. They had returned to recover whatever lay under the bag, but the digging ruptured the main and trapped their vehicle at the scene. The situation should have made them easier to contain. Instead, it made them desperate. Driver got out and slammed the door. Up close, I recognized him. Carl Wexler, age 61, male, senior groundskeeper. Carl had worked at St. Bartholomew's for more than 30 years. He was the man whose phone Linda could not reach. The man who had taken the main excavator to the repair yard. The man who had installed the basement drain line in 2016. He wore an old cemetery work coat with the logo torn off. The shovel in his hands had a steel shaft and a squared blade. "You," I said. Carl stared at me through the rain. "You should have stayed in the office." The hooded man pulled back his hood. He was younger than Carl, perhaps 40, with a narrow face and a split in one eyebrow. I had never seen him before. The woman said, "Carl, we're done." "No," Carl said, "we're not." He looked toward the flooding hole. "We still have time." The woman grabbed his sleeve. "The pipe's gone." Fire trucks are coming. Carl shook her off. You think I don't hear them? In the distance, sirens rose and fell. Relief should have come with the sound. It didn't. The sirens were approaching from the south entrance. The shortest route from the gate to the office crossed the low road beneath Eastfield, exactly where runoff from the broken main was now pouring downhill. I keyed the radio again. Linda, close the main drive. The water main ruptured. Keep the fire engines at the gate. Static. Then a broken fragment of her voice. Can't hear, I called her phone. No signal. The storm had weakened reception across the low section, or the network was overloaded, or my phone was too wet. I tried dispatch. The call failed. The fire engines entered the cemetery. Red light pulsed through the trees. Carl smiled without humor. Too late. The first engine came up the central avenue, heavy and slow. Water crossed the road ahead of it, carrying mud and gravel from the slope. I ran toward the intersection, waving the maglite. The driver saw me and braked. The truck stopped 20 yards before the wash. A firefighter opened the passenger door. What have we got? Broken water main. Possible collapse under the road. Don't cross. The officer climbed down, helmet already on. Behind him, a second vehicle turned in through the gate. Not fire department, a county patrol car. At last, the deputy parked near the engine and stepped out into the rain. For a few seconds, everything seemed to shift in our favor. Uniforms, radios, emergency lights, witnesses. Carl dropped the shovel. The woman raised both hands. The younger man did not. He ran. He cut north between the monuments, heading toward the chapel and the boundary wall. The deputy shouted and pursued him. The fire officer called for the deputy to stop because of unstable ground. Neither listened. I watched both of them disappear into the darkness near the chapel. Then a cracking sound rolled across Eastfield. Not thunder. A line opened through the grass from the broken excavation toward the central road. The ground sank along the buried water main, section by section, like a seam being unzipped beneath the cemetery. One of the old headstones tilted, then another. The depression reached the asphalt between us and the office. The road dropped nearly a foot. The fire engine reversed, but its rear wheels spun on the incline. The driver corrected. Too late. The truck slid sideways and struck a granite monument with its rear step. Stone cracked. The impact stopped the engine from going farther. No one was injured, but the main road was now blocked by a fire engine, moving water and broken pavement. The only other vehicle route to the south gate was the lower lane behind the maintenance buildings, the same lane I had used, and my sedan was stuck across its narrowest curve. Linda and Evan were trapped at the office. We were trapped on the eastern side. Carl looked at me. He understood it at the same moment I did. No vehicles were leaving until the water stopped or heavy equipment arrived. The fire officer ordered everyone away from the collapse line. 2 firefighters moved Carl and the woman toward the engine. I started back toward the office on foot. Carl called after me. You need to get them out of the basement. I turned. They're upstairs. He shook his head. Not Linda. What are you talking about? She'll go back for the index. The basement's flooding. I know. His face looked different now. Not frightened of the police, frightened of time. The fire officer pushed him toward the engine. Carl twisted around. E14 isn't the only one, he shouted. The index tells you where the others are. The officer told him to be quiet. Carl kept yelling. And the next one isn't empty. That sentence stopped me. The woman closed her eyes. The firefighter holding her arm looked between them. I asked, "What next one?" Carl said nothing else. Then, from the direction of the office, the emergency exit sign went dark. A moment later, flames appeared behind one of the basement windows. Small at first, orange against black glass, then brighter. Water had flooded the records room. The power had been shut off, and yet something below the office had ignited. Evan was injured. Linda had gone back for the interment index. The road between us had collapsed. The lower lane was blocked by my car, and the only person who might know what was burning beneath the office had just been placed in handcuffs beside a sinking grave he had tried to empty. I handed my flashlight to the fire officer, climbed over the cracked edge of the central road, and dropped into the runoff on the other side. The water reached my knees and nearly took my feet from under me. Behind me, someone shouted to stop. I kept moving. There was no safe route left, only the shortest one. The runoff hit hard enough to turn my legs sideways. I caught the broken edge of the asphalt with both hands and dragged myself onto the office side of the collapse. Gravel pressed into my palms. The water smelled of clay, rust, and something sharp from the ruptured line. Behind me, the fire officer shouted through the rain, "Stay out of the building." I got up anyway. The cemetery office stood 70 yards downhill. Smoke pushed from the basement window in short gray bursts, flattening against the brick before the wind tore it apart. The front door was open. I ran. By the time I reached the steps, my right knee had started shaking from the cold. The emergency exit sign above the door was dark. Inside, the office looked abandoned, except for the beam of a flashlight lying on the floor and spinning slowly as if someone had kicked it. Evan. A cough answered from behind the reception counter. I found him on the floor beside the desk, one hand over his mouth. His injured ankle stretched in front of him. Linda's coat had been wrapped around his shoulders. Where is she? Basement. Of course she is. She went for the binders. How long? 2 minutes, maybe 3. Smoke hung above waist level, thicker near the basement door. The fire itself was still below, crackling with a wet, uneven sound. I pulled Evan upright. He could stand on one leg, but not walk without support. "We need to get you outside." "No, Linda first. I'm not carrying both of you. You're not carrying me." He grabbed the counter and hopped once toward the door. His face went white. "That's not walking," I said. "It's movement." The basement stairwell coughed smoke into the office. Then Linda screamed, not loudly. That made it worse. A short cry cut off in the middle. I left Evan at the counter and went down. The smoke became dense halfway along the stairs. I crouched and pulled my shirt over my nose. Heat reached up from the records room, but it wasn't the rolling heat of a room fully involved. Something specific was burning. Paper, plastic, fuel, the smell from the false grave. At the bottom, flames climbed the shelving beside the map table. They were blue near the floor and orange above, feeding along a trail that ran through the water. The water itself was burning in patches. Linda, a flashlight beam moved behind the fallen shelf. Here, I crossed carefully, stepping around the flames. The floor was slick with floating paper and mud. Smoke collected beneath the low ductwork. Linda was pinned at the far end of the room. The leaning shelf we had caught earlier had shifted after we left. One corner had dropped across her lower leg, trapping her between the steel frame and the concrete wall. 3 black index binders were clutched against her chest. You came back for those. I know. That may be the stupidest thing you've ever done. I know. Her voice shook. That frightened me. Linda never admitted anything while it was still happening. I grabbed the shelf. It didn't move. What's burning? I don't know. I shone my light along the floor. A broken glass bottle lay beneath the map table. Clear liquid spread from it in a shining ribbon. Another bottle sat open beside a cardboard box. Accelerant, not gasoline. The smell was cleaner, mineral spirits or paint thinner. The sweet chemical odor from the grave. The flames had followed it from the wall toward the records. The fire wasn't an electrical accident. Someone had prepared it. Was this here before? I asked. No, you're sure? Yes, the answer came too quickly to be uncertainty. I pulled at the shelf again. Nothing. Linda looked toward the stairs. Leave me and get Evan out. No, Daniel, no. The panic behind my ribs surged. My father on the bathroom floor. My daughter wheezing at 2 years old while I stared at the pediatrician's number and forgot how phones worked. Every time my mind had stalled because making the wrong choice felt worse than making no choice. The smoke thickened. I forced myself to look around, not at the whole room, at objects, the broom, the map drawers, the steel table, the fallen shelving, the tamping bar. It lay half submerged beneath a stack of collapsed boxes, the missing tamping bar from the lower shed. I waded over and pulled it free. One end was flattened for prying, jammed it beneath the bottom rail of the shelf, and used a fallen ledger as a fulcrum. Pull your leg when I lift. Linda nodded. I leaned down. The bar flexed. The shelf rose perhaps an inch. Linda pulled. She screamed through her teeth. Again. I repositioned the ledger and pushed harder. Pain shot through both palms where the metal had cut me earlier. My grip slipped in blood and water. The shelf rose. Linda dragged her leg free. The steel frame dropped with a crash, sending sparks from the burning papers. Linda rolled onto her back, breathing in quick, shallow pulls. Her left trouser leg was torn below the knee. Blood ran from a deep scrape along her shin, but the leg remained straight. Can you stand? I think. That means no. I hooked one of her arms over my shoulder. She held onto the binders with the other. Drop them. No, Linda. They're the reason for this. They're paper. They're evidence. The ceiling duct popped above us as heat warped the metal. I took the binders from her, shoved 2 under my jacket, and threw the 3rd onto the stairs. Then I pulled her up. She put weight on the injured leg and nearly collapsed. We moved 1 step at a time. At the base of the stairs, a figure appeared through the smoke. For 1 second, I thought it was Evan. Then the person came lower, and I saw the split eyebrow. The fleeing man from Eastfield. He held a red plastic fuel can. His right sleeve was torn and muddy. Blood ran from his hairline. I stopped. Linda felt me stop. What? The man descended 2 more steps. He looked past us at the fire. You should have left it. His voice was calm now. No whispering, no urgency. That was more frightening than the shouting outside. You set this, I said. He raised the can. Put her down. I shifted Linda farther behind me. You're trapped too. No. He nodded toward the small basement window. The window opened into the narrow exterior, well along the north wall. Too small for a broad man, maybe. Not for him. You're burning burial records, Linda said. I'm burning copies. The index isn't a copy. His eyes moved to the binders under my jacket. That answered a question. He had come back for them. I asked, "Who are you?" He looked at me as if the name no longer mattered. Linda answered, "Thomas Vale." The man's expression changed. Not much. Enough. Linda said, "You worked county emergency management." Thomas tightened his grip on the can. Contracted logistics. The bag, I said. Flood response stock. Written off after the 2019 warehouse damage. What did you bury? Nothing that concerns you. Carl said another grave wasn't empty. Thomas glanced toward the flames. He talks when he's afraid. So do guilty people. Move. He tipped the fuel can. I saw the liquid gather near the spout. If he poured it onto the stairs, the fire would cut off our only exit. If he threw it at us, clothing could ignite before we reached the water on the floor. I lifted the tamping bar. Thomas gave a tired smile. You won't. He was right about one thing. I did not want to hit him. That old paralysis returned, thin but immediate. What if I struck his head? What if he died? What if I did nothing and Linda burned? Responsibility narrowed to 1 second. Thomas stepped down. I swung, not at him, at the fuel can. The flattened end of the bar struck the plastic near the handle. The can flew from his grip, hit the wall, and split. Mineral spirits splashed across the stairs. Thomas lunged. We collided against the railing. Linda fell sideways into the shallow water. Thomas grabbed the bar with both hands. His face was close enough that I smelled blood and cigarettes. You stupid bastard. He drove his forehead into my nose. White light burst across my vision. I lost the bar. He shoved me down. My shoulder struck a stair edge. Something shifted with a thick, internal snap. My left arm stopped working correctly. Thomas stepped over me toward Linda. She was trying to stand. He pulled one binder from beneath my jacket where it had fallen and threw it into the flames. The cover curled immediately. Linda grabbed his ankle. Thomas kicked backward. His boot struck her cheek. She went still. I reached for the tamping bar with my right hand. Too far. The spilled fuel on the stairs caught. Flame ran upward with a soft, rushing sound. Thomas turned toward the window instead of the exit. He knew the stairs were gone. He crossed the records room, moving through the flooded section where the flames could not hold. He took the remaining binder from the floor and headed for the window well. I crawled after him. My left shoulder hung low, arm numb below the elbow. The room pulsed in and out of focus. Blood ran from my nose into my mouth. Thomas kicked the basement window. The old glass shattered outward. He cleared the frame with the fuel can's metal spout, then pushed one arm through. The opening was narrow. He could fit. I grabbed his coat. He dragged me through the water. I held on. He turned and stomped on my hand. Once, twice. My fingers opened. Thomas pushed his head and shoulders through the window. Then he stopped. Someone outside had caught him. His body jerked backward. A voice shouted through the broken opening. "Hands, show me your hands," the deputy. Thomas twisted violently. The deputy had returned from the chapel side and found the exterior well. He could not pull Thomas through because the opening was too tight. Thomas could not retreat because I had grabbed his belt with my right hand. For a few seconds, we held him between us. Then Thomas reached inside his coat. The deputy shouted again. A gunshot cracked outside. The sound inside the basement was enormous. Thomas went slack. His weight fell back into the room and landed partly across me. I rolled away. The bullet had entered high in his shoulder near the collarbone. Blood spread through his coat, but he was breathing. The deputy appeared at the window, face wet and frantic. "Can you reach the stairs? Fire crews coming around the north wall. Linda's down. Is she breathing?" I crawled to her. She was conscious, barely. Her cheek had already begun swelling. She coughed when I rolled her onto her side. "Breathing," I shouted. Evan's voice came from the top of the stairs. "Daniel." The flames had climbed halfway up, but a narrow strip remained along the wall. He stood there, holding the office fire extinguisher. On one leg. "You're supposed to be outside," I yelled. "You're supposed to observe and report." He pulled the pin and discharged the extinguisher down the stairwell. White powder blasted through the smoke. The flames flattened, but did not disappear. "Again," I shouted. He swept the base. The burning mineral spirits retreated toward the floor. A path opened. I dragged Linda toward the stairs using my right arm and the back of her coat. My left shoulder sent hot pain through my chest every time it moved. Thomas groaned behind us. The deputy shouted that he would handle him. Evan came down 2 steps, braced himself against the wall, and reached for Linda. "You'll fall," I said. "Then catch me. I have one arm. Use the good one." Together, badly, we got her onto the first step. Then the ceiling above the map table collapsed. Not the whole ceiling. A section of old plaster and insulation dropped into the fire, scattering sparks and burning paper. The fallen debris blocked the route to the window and struck Thomas across the legs. The deputy swore outside. Thomas screamed. I looked back. He was alive, pinned. The fire was spreading behind him. The deputy could not enter through the window with Thomas blocking the opening. I had a choice, again. Leave him and get Linda out, or go back for the man who had tried to burn us alive. Linda gripped my sleeve. No, she knew what I was thinking. "He'll die," I said. "He made this. That doesn't change it." My father's face came to me then, not dead, but tired and embarrassed on the bathroom floor, asking me not to call an ambulance because he did not want the neighbors to see. I had delayed 4 minutes. He survived that night. He died months later. The delay still lived in me as if the outcome had been different. I handed Linda to Evan. "Get her up. Daniel, go." I turned back. Thomas had stopped screaming and was pulling at the debris with one arm. Blood from his shoulder mixed with the water around him. I used the tamping bar to pry the largest piece of ceiling off his legs. My shoulder screamed when I leaned. I nearly blacked out. Thomas looked at me. He did not thank me. He said, "The Brennan grave." "What? That's the next one." I stopped prying. "What's in it?" "Not in it yet." The flames cracked along the shelving. Talk, Thomas coughed. Vault goes in at 6:30. Nobody questions fresh soil after a burial. The metal object beneath E14. The other false graves. The missing key log. A system built around legitimate cemetery work. What were you moving? I asked. Records, phones, IDs. From what? His eyes closed briefly. People who paid to disappear. That was only part of it. I could hear that in his voice. Carl said one wasn't empty. Thomas opened his eyes. That one didn't pay. A section of burning cardboard fell beside us. I pried again. The debris shifted. Thomas pulled his legs free. The deputy reached through the window and caught his coat. Together, we moved him toward the opening. My strength went suddenly. I fell onto one knee. Thomas was dragged halfway out, then fully through, shouting as the broken frame cut his side. Firefighters entered the basement behind me wearing breathing apparatus. They moved with practiced speed, one team on the hose, another toward Linda and Evan. No sudden rescue. They had walked around the collapsed road, carried equipment over unstable ground, and reached us only after we had already run out of safe choices. A firefighter took hold of my jacket. Can you stand? Yes, I tried, my legs folded. No, I said. They carried me up. Outside, the rain had begun to weaken. Dawn was still more than an hour away, but the sky over the eastern wall had softened from black to dark gray. Linda lay on a tarp beneath the office awning, oxygen mask over her face. Evan sat beside her with his ankle splinted. Carl was handcuffed near the fire engine, watching the basement windows. The unidentified woman stood beside a patrol vehicle. She was crying without making any sound. Thomas lay in the grass near the window, while paramedics worked on his shoulder. The fire was contained to the basement. Most of the old records were destroyed or soaked beyond saving. One black interment binder remained. Evan had carried it out beneath his sweatshirt. The deputy opened it on the hood of the patrol car. Inside were handwritten plot numbers, dates, initials, vehicle descriptions, and columns marked in and out. E14 appeared 3 times. So did the Brennan plot. The most recent entry had that morning's date. Beside it was a name, Mara Vale. The woman near the patrol car stopped crying. Thomas's sister. Her hands had been trembling since Eastfield, not because she feared us, but because the grave scheduled for 8 o'clock had been prepared to hide whatever Thomas intended to do to her before the family arrived. Carl saw the name. He lowered his head. The fight went out of him. The deputy asked Mara whether she was in immediate danger. She said yes. Then she pointed toward the trapped SUV and told them there was a metal case beneath the cargo floor containing passports, cash, and the phones of people whose disappearances had been sold as a service. Thomas closed his eyes as she spoke. The cemetery had never been haunted. It had been useful. Quiet roads, loose record-keeping, open soil, families accustomed to seeing excavation equipment. A place where disturbed earth attracted no attention as long as someone put the grass back correctly. By sunrise, the fire was out. Thomas was alive and under guard. Carl had asked for a lawyer. Mara was in a patrol car with a blanket around her shoulders. Linda and Evan were headed to the hospital. The Brennan burial had been stopped before the vault truck arrived, and I sat on the back step of an ambulance with my left shoulder dislocated, 2 broken fingers, a fractured nose, and enough smoke in my lungs that every breath scraped. The false graves had finally become real evidence, but when I looked across the damaged cemetery, I could see 3 places where the ground had settled differently from the rows around them. Not fresh, not obvious, just slightly lower. There were more locations in the binder than there were empty entries, some marked out, some never marked again. The conflict was over. The digging had stopped. What remained beneath the cemetery had not. The first thing they did at the hospital was cut off my jacket. I remember being annoyed about that. Not frightened, not relieved, annoyed. It was a decent jacket, the only one I owned that was actually waterproof, and a nurse with purple-framed glasses took trauma shears to the left sleeve without asking. She said they needed access to my shoulder. I told her the zipper worked. She said, "Your arm is hanging 3 inches lower than the other one." That ended the discussion. They reduced the dislocation in the emergency department after giving me something that made the ceiling tiles drift apart. My nose was set later. 2 fingers on my right hand were splinted. The smoke inhalation turned out to be mild enough that I did not need to be intubated, which a respiratory therapist explained as though I should feel lucky. I did, eventually. At 6:30 that morning, while I sat in a curtained bay wearing a hospital gown and paper socks, the vault company arrived at St. Bartholomew's. They found the south gate blocked by county vehicles. The Brennan family did not. The funeral home caught them before they left the church and told them there had been an infrastructure failure at the cemetery. That was the phrase used publicly for the first few hours. Infrastructure failure. It covered the broken water main, the collapsed road, the fire-damaged office, and the fact that their father's open grave had never been prepared because another grave, one that officially did not exist, had led police into a criminal investigation. Mr. Brennan was buried 4 days later at another cemetery in Mercer County. His daughter sent Linda an email saying she understood. Linda read it 6 times and never replied. She was admitted for smoke inhalation and observation. The cut along her shin needed 23 stitches. Nothing was broken in her face, though the swelling around her cheek turned dark purple by the 2nd day. She stayed in the hospital overnight because her oxygen level dropped when she walked. Evan went home the same afternoon in a walking boot with a torn ankle ligament and a small fracture in his wrist that had not shown clearly until the radiologist reviewed the images. He hated the boot. He hated the wrist brace more. According to him, both made people ask what happened, and he did not know how to answer without either lying or telling the kind of truth that caused strangers to stare. My daughter visited me after school. Her name is Sophie Mercer, age 9, female. She came into the hospital room holding my ex-wife's hand and carrying a folded piece of construction paper. Sophie had my dark hair, her mother's steady eyes, and the ability to detect a lie before I had finished deciding to tell one. She stopped beside the bed. "You look bad," Thank you. Mom said your nose was broken. It's been repaired. It still looks broken. My ex-wife, Rachel Mercer, age 36, female, stood behind her with her coat still on. Rachel and I had reached the stage after divorce where we could be polite for almost an hour before old injuries began pressing through the conversation. She worked as a physical therapist in Cranberry Township and knew enough medical language to understand more than I wanted her to. She looked at the sling, the splints, and the oxygen monitor clipped to my finger. "What were you doing inside a burning building?" she asked. "Sophie's here. I can see her." "I was helping someone." "That isn't an answer." "It is, you just don't like it." Her mouth tightened. Sophie unfolded the construction paper and handed it to me. She had drawn 3 people standing beneath a yellow sun. One of them had an arm in a sling. Behind us was a black fence and a row of gray stones. At the top she had written, "Dad came back." The letters were uneven and pressed hard enough to dent the paper. I looked at the picture too long. Sophie shifted beside the bed. "Are you going to cry?" "No." Rachel looked away toward the window. I did not cry. My eyes watered from the smoke and the broken nose. That was the explanation I kept. The sheriff's office interviewed me twice before I was discharged. The first interview happened while the pain medication was still strong. A detective named Maria Sloan, age 44, female, sat beside the bed with a legal pad and told me to say when I needed a break. She had short black hair and a voice that remained level even when asking questions designed to expose mistakes. She asked why I had moved the shovel. I told her. She asked why my first call to dispatch omitted the body bag. I told her that too. "You understood it might be relevant," she said. "Yes, but you described the incident as vandalism." "Yes. Why?" I looked at my wrapped fingers. "Because I wanted time to understand it. Because I did not want uniformed people arriving before I knew whether Linda and Evan had done something criminal. Because some part of me still believed that if I could organize a problem before anyone else saw it, then I could control the outcome." "I made the report smaller than the situation," I said. Detective Sloan wrote that down. "Why?" "I was afraid of being wrong." She stopped writing. "And after the vehicle returned, I was afraid of being too late." That seemed to satisfy her more than the first answer. The second interview took place 2 days later at the sheriff's office. By then, I knew enough to understand how much worse it could have been. Thomas Vale survived surgery. The bullet damaged his shoulder and fractured part of his scapula, but missed the major artery beneath his collarbone. The deputy had fired once after seeing Thomas reach into his coat. What Thomas had reached for was not a gun. It was a folding knife. That detail changed nothing legally, and somehow made the whole encounter feel smaller and uglier. A knife, a basement window, a man trying to destroy a binder. Carl Wexler was charged with conspiracy, evidence tampering, burglary, criminal mischief, and several offenses tied to fraudulent identification documents. More charges followed as investigators opened the case from the metal box beneath the SUV's cargo floor. Mara Vale entered protective custody for 3 days, then gave a formal statement. She had not known the full scale of Thomas's operation. She knew he helped people disappear. He called it relocation work. Clients paid cash, surrendered their phones, and received documents under new names. Some were running from debts, some from spouses, some from police investigations. Thomas stored their original belongings temporarily in sealed utility boxes beneath unofficial cemetery locations. Carl controlled access to the grounds and altered paper records when necessary. The cemetery was not the only storage site. It was simply the safest. Mara had discovered the binder after Thomas asked her to move a locked case from his garage. She opened it, photographed several pages, and threatened to go to the police. Thomas convinced her to meet him at the cemetery so he could show her that nobody had been harmed. Carl later told investigators that Thomas had not planned to kill her. Carl claimed the Brennan entry referred only to burying Mara's phone, passport, and car registration after forcing her to leave the state under a false identity. Mara did not believe him. Neither did Detective Sloan. The entry beside Mara's name had no outdate. Investigators searched 3 false plots during the first week. E14 contained a watertight steel utility chest secured beneath treated lumber. The water main rupture had filled it with mud, but technicians recovered 6 mobile phones, 2 passports, a driver's license, cash sealed in freezer bags, and a small revolver with its serial number filed away. The grave behind the old chapel contained another chest, mostly documents. The site near the north wall contained no box. It contained a body. The remains belonged to a man named Patrick Heller, age 47, when he disappeared in 2021. He had worked as an accountant for a trucking company outside Youngstown. His wife had reported him missing after his car was found at a bus station in Pittsburgh. For 3 years, police believed he had left voluntarily. The autopsy showed a fracture at the back of his skull. Carl said Patrick had panicked during a meeting and fallen against the corner of a concrete vault lid. Thomas said Carl had struck him with a shovel. Both accused the other. The medical examiner could not determine which account was true. Patrick Heller was the person Carl meant when he said one grave was not empty. His wife came to identify personal effects. She did not speak to the press. The county excavated 7 more sites listed in the surviving binder. 5 contained boxes. 1 was empty, except for a strip of rotted plastic. 1 had been dug and refilled so long ago that the soil layers had blended. Ground-penetrating radar showed no large object beneath it. Investigators found a brass zipper pull, 3 shirt buttons, and nothing else. No remains, no documents, nothing that explained why it had been marked in 2016 and never marked out. The sheriff's office kept that location closed for another month. Then they released it. St. Bartholomew's Cemetery shut down completely for 11 weeks. The parish hired engineers, environmental contractors, and a temporary records team. The central road was excavated and rebuilt. The water main was replaced. The office basement was stripped to bare block and treated for smoke and mold. Shelves of damaged ledgers were sent to a conservation company in Philadelphia, where technicians separated pages one at a time and froze some of the wet records to slow deterioration. The fire destroyed less than we first thought. Water caused most of the damage. That seemed appropriate. Linda resigned before the cemetery reopened. She did it by email from her kitchen table. She had worked there 29 years. Her resignation was 4 sentences long. She accepted responsibility for failing to report the earlier disturbed sites and for allowing informal key control practices to continue. She did not mention Carl by name. She did not defend herself. The parish offered her a severance agreement that required confidentiality. She refused to sign it. When I visited her in March, she was walking with a cane and had turned her dining room into an archive. Copies of maps covered the table. Printed news articles were stacked beside color-coded folders. She had started helping Patrick Heller's wife gather records for a civil lawsuit. "You should rest," I told her. I rested for 6 days. That isn't enough. It was intolerable. Her cheek had healed, but a narrow scar remained beneath her left eye where Thomas's boot had split the skin. She caught me looking at it. "You saved him," she said. "I helped get him out. He tried to burn us. I remember. Do you regret it?" I thought about Thomas lying beneath the fallen ceiling, about the choice lasting only a few seconds, about how much pain followed. "No." Linda nodded, as if disappointed by an answer she had expected. "I might," she said. That was the most honest thing I ever heard her say. Evan returned to work when the cemetery reopened. Not as a groundskeeper. He took a records position in the temporary office trailer. His ankle remained stiff, and his wrist hurt in cold weather. He refused to operate excavation equipment after the incident. The parish tried to persuade him. He told them no. Then they asked again. He quit. The last time I saw him, he was working for a landscaping company in Beaver Falls, building retaining walls around a shopping center. He said he liked jobs where the purpose of a whole was obvious. I did not return to night security. The security company placed me on medical leave, then offered me a daytime position at an industrial park near Butler. I accepted. My shift began at 7 in the morning. There were loading docks, delivery drivers, and vending machines that stole dollar bills. At noon, forklifts beeped in reverse. At 3, employees lined up at the exit while I checked bags and badges. Nothing happened underground. That helped. My shoulder never fully recovered. I completed physical therapy, but reaching behind my back still sent a hot line of pain down my arm. 2 fingers remained slightly crooked. My nose healed with a small ridge on the left side. Sophie said it made me look tougher. Rachel said it made me snore. We started speaking more after the fire, not getting back together. Nothing that simple. She stopped treating me like a man who would disappear whenever life became difficult, and I stopped treating every question as an accusation. Some weeks I had Sophie 4 nights instead of 3. Once, during a storm, Rachel called and asked whether I wanted her to pick Sophie up early. I said no. I stayed. The criminal cases moved slowly. Carl pleaded guilty to conspiracy, evidence tampering, identity fraud, and abuse of a corpse. He received a sentence that would likely keep him in prison for the rest of his life. Thomas went to trial. Mara testified against him. So did I. The prosecutor showed the jury photographs of the false plots, the steel boxes, the burned basement, and the binder page with Mara's name. My own photos from the first hole became some of the clearest evidence because they had been taken before the rain, the collapse, and the fire. Thomas watched me from the defense table. His injured shoulder had left his right arm visibly weaker. He wore a dark suit and kept his hands folded. When I described pulling him from the basement, his expression did not change. He was convicted of attempted murder, conspiracy, arson, evidence tampering, kidnapping-related charges connected to Mara, and multiple fraud offenses. Patrick Heller's death produced no murder conviction. The jury could not determine whether Thomas or Carl had caused the fatal injury. That part remained legally unresolved. Patrick's family buried him at a cemetery near Poland, Ohio, not St. Bartholomew S. The parish replaced every lock before reopening. 12 new cameras covered the grounds. Digital plot maps were backed up off-site. Contractors signed keys in and out through an electronic system requiring photographs and timestamps. The new rules were sensible. They were also late. On the first anniversary of the fire, I drove past the cemetery after picking Sophie up from a friend's house. It was early evening. The sun had not gone down yet. Fresh asphalt ran through the repaired Central Avenue. The office windows were new. A white utility truck stood near the maintenance garage, and 2 workers in reflective vests were placing cones beside a family plot. Sophie looked up from the back seat. "Is that your old work?" "Yes." "Can we stop?" I almost said no. Instead, I pulled into the main entrance. The cemetery looked smaller in daylight. That surprised me. We parked near the Veterans Memorial and walked as far as the stone angel with no hands. The ground around E14 had been graded and reseeded. No marker identified what had happened there. Grass covered the repaired section in a rectangle, slightly greener than everything around it. Sophie stood beside me. "Was the hole here?" "Yes." She looked at the grass. "Where's the grave?" "There wasn't one." She considered that. Then she asked, "Why would someone dig a grave if nobody was going in it?" I had heard the question from detectives, reporters, lawyers, and parish officials. Her version was harder. "To hide things," I said. "What things?" "Things they didn't want found." She nodded as though that made enough sense for now. A groundskeeper drove past us on a mower. The engine rattled, cut grass and exhaust mixed in the warm air. Somewhere near the office, a phone rang through an open window. Ordinary sounds, the kind I had once stopped hearing. We walked back toward the car. Near the angel, Sophie bent and picked something from the edge of the road. A small piece of red tape, mud-stained, faded, the same color used to mark tools from the lower shed. She held it up. "Trash." I took it from her. Probably. There were 100 explanations. It could have torn from an old shovel during the excavation. It could have been washed through the soil after the water main collapse. It could have come from one of the evidence teams, the repair crews, or the new maintenance staff using the same color system. I put it in my pocket. At home, I meant to throw it away. I didn't. It stayed in the small ceramic bowl beside my keys for several months, curled into itself like a dry leaf. Then one morning, it was gone. Sophie said she had not touched it. Rachel had not been inside the house. I probably threw it away and forgot. That is the explanation I use. St. Bartholomew's still buries people. Funeral processions pass through the gate. Families stand beneath tents, while workers lower vaults into real graves marked on current maps. The soil is packed. Flowers are arranged. The grass grows back. Nothing about that is strange. But sometimes I drive past at night and see the new security lights moving over the stones. One camera turns toward East Field, pauses, turns away. And for those few seconds, the repaired strip beside the handless angel sits outside the light. That's it for this nightmare. If you enjoyed it, please like the video, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and turn on notifications. It really helps keep the stories alive. And don't stop here. Dive into another one of our videos and keep the fear going.